Chapter 256. Yen Tai met Qin Wentian's gaze without the slightest hint of fear. How laughable, this brat actually wanted to kill him instead of saving his own life. With a sinister smile on his face, Yen Tai began to inscribe divine inscriptions. Not only him, the three brothers of the Li clan, Gauze, and the youth from the demon cult also began to inscribe divine inscriptions. The three brothers of the Li clan simultaneously inscribed divine inscriptions in three different directions. However, the divine inscriptions they inscribed seemed to be resonating with each other, as though they could fuse together at any moment. This caused the hearts of the spectators to tremble. The divine inscriptions they inscribed must be extremely tyrannical. As for Gauze, each and every one of his strokes was filled with boundless majesty. The divine inscriptions he inscribed exuded the aura of a grandmaster. Based on Gauze's reputation, the divine inscriptions he inscribed would definitely be peak tier, third-ranked. After all, Fenrir had given them 2 hours of time to display their abilities. The divine inscriptions inscribed by the young man from the demon cult actually contained a demonic aura, causing the spectators to feel a demonic aura gushing forth. It was extremely intense, and no one dared to underestimate the silent young man from the demon cult. This time around, it's a test of true ability. I wonder who can inscribe the strongest attack-type divine inscriptions. Those from the various transcendent powers were all seriously observing the divine inscriptions they were inscribing. They guessed that the three brothers of the Li clan had a high possibility of obtaining first place. The White Deer Institute, represented by Gauze, would only be able to obtain second place. As for Yen Tai, he might be able to obtain third place. Although the youth from the demon cult was powerful, the other three transcendent powers were even stronger. One must know that before the appearance of the three brothers and Gauze, Yen Tai's reputation was the highest. Many people believed that the Yen clan would obtain 10 slots to enter the refinement grounds. The members of the Yen clan were all extremely nervous. Those from the Len clan were also extremely excited. They had paid such a hefty price just for this rare exchange. They didn't even mind sacrificing a female descendant of their clan in exchange for a few slots. They hoped that Yen Tai would be able to obtain first place. Ling Jian, how was your exchange with Yen Tai earlier? An elder from the Len clan, Ling Mao, asked. Ling Jian's countenance was extremely unsightly. He walked towards Ling Mao and whispered, Yen Tai said that he would exchange 1 slot for a female descendant of our Ling clan. Impudent. Ling Mao's expression turned ugly. Hasn't our Ling clan paid enough? Ling Jian was speechless, he lowered his head, not daring to speak. Ling Mao glared at him, causing Ling Jian to speak up, it's all because of that Qin Wentian and Ling Ning. If it weren't for the death of Yen Tai's son, how could things have ended up like this? Ling Ning alone is enough. Humph. Ling Mao snorted, let's wait and see. Ling Jian nodded his head as he turned his gaze onto the Dao platform. The people there were all focused on inscribing divine inscriptions. Qin Wentian. Ling Jian stared at Qin Wentian, only to see that Qin Wentian was also quietly inscribing divine inscriptions. However, there was no sense of beauty to his inscriptions. There was no pattern to be seen at all, and Ling Jian had no idea what he was inscribing. What the hell is that? Ling Jian coldly laughed. After all, this third-ranked divine inscriptionist was still too young. His ability to inscribe divine inscriptions wasn't good enough. In the direction of the White Deer Institute, the large-eyed elder turned to Bailu Yan and asked, who do you think has the most exquisite divine inscriptions? Bailu Yan was none other than the divine inscriptionist who had lost to Qin Wentian back in the White Deer Institute. He turned his gaze onto the Dao platform as he replied in a low voice, the divine inscriptions of the three brothers of the Li clan and Grandmaster Gauze are the most exquisite. Yen Tai's divine inscriptions are a little strange, exuding a sinister aura, and will be extremely difficult to deal with. The divine inscriptions of the young man from the demon cult are filled with demonic qi, as well as a faint killing intent. The large-eyed elder nodded his head lightly. In that case, between the three brothers of the Li clan and Grandmaster Gauze, who do you think will win? I can't be sure. Bailu Yan shook his head. This time around, if the Watermoon Mountain Villa managed to seize the initiative, I'm afraid that they would also be able to obstruct us when we enter the refinement grounds. The large-eyed elder frowned. How about Qin Wentian? What about his divine inscriptions? I don't understand, there's no aura at all. Bailu Yan furrowed his brows. Logically speaking, back then when Qin Wentian fought against him, Qin Wentian was able to inscribe inscriptions in the air with each step he took, causing the shrill of his sword to soar through the air. Qin Wentian's talent in the Tao of divine inscriptions should be extremely high. But at this moment, he couldn't understand the divine inscriptions Qin Wentian was inscribing. On the city walls, the sharp-looking middle-aged man beside Yang Fan asked Fenrir, Grandmaster, how strong are the divine inscriptionists this time around? The star-seizing manor wanted to bring these people into the refinement grounds, but they didn't need just one person. They needed all the top 3 divine inscriptionists. Only then would they be able to work for them after entering the refinement grounds. Not bad. Fenrir smiled as he nodded his head. Not only were they not bad, there were also 2 youths with extremely high potential. The middle-aged man nodded his head lightly. Since Grandmaster Fenrir said that their divine inscriptions weren't bad, they were definitely not bad. Time flowed by, and soon, 2 hours had passed. Out of the 4 major powers, only 5 of them were inscribing divine inscriptions. This was because Grandmaster Gauze and Qin Wentian from the White Deer Institute were in their own formations. However, Grandmaster Gauze was the most important one. Although Qin Wentian had an extremely high level of perception, this was a test of one's true strength. Most probably, Qin Wentian was just going through the motions casually. At this moment, the spectators could already feel the terrifying aura emanating from the inscribed divine inscriptions. It was extremely powerful, and they could clearly sense the shadow of the inscriptions taking shape. At the location of the 3 brothers of the Li clan, a 3-headed flood dragon appeared, exuding a tyrannical might. Not only that, the 3 flood dragons were linked together. At the location of Grandmaster Gauze, a demonic beast divine inscription appeared as the shadow of an azure dragon shimmered. Since it was an attack-type divine inscription, the beast-type divine inscription was undoubtedly extremely suitable. The divine inscription Yen Tai was inscribing was the most sinister. It was as though there were countless rays of demonic light flickering within, giving off a terrifying feeling. The divine inscription of the young man from the demon cult was inscribing was extremely dense, resembling a purgatory python. His venomous eyes flickered with a terrifying light. How powerful, almost all of them are 3rd-ranked attack-type divine inscriptions. This should be sufficient to deal with peak-level Yuanfu realm cultivators. These people stood in the center of the divine inscriptions, and could control them as they pleased. Right now, the only thing that didn't reveal its might was Qin Wentian's divine inscriptions. He stood there as a mysterious aura permeated the surroundings. A surge of energy revolved around him, and it was unknown what kind of divine inscriptions he was inscribing. Time's up, Fenrir indifferently stated. The show is about to begin. Yen Tai coldly laughed, as a sinister light flickered in his eyes. Go! The 3 old men from the Li clan pointed out with their fingers. Instantly, the 3-headed flood dragon roared as it dashed towards Gauze. The terrifying 3-headed flood dragon blotted out the skies. Gauze coldly snorted, as the shadow of the azure dragon behind him soared up into the skies. The roar of a dragon reverberated through the air, shaking the entire space. Its sharp claws slashed out, aiming for the heads of the 3-headed flood dragon. Such power! The hearts of the spectators trembled. They saw Gauze soaring up into the skies, transforming into the spirit of a demonic beast. This demonic beast was born from the divine inscriptions, and Gauze was its master. The astral energy in his body frenziedly gushed forth, as the azure dragon and the 3-headed flood dragon clashed against each other. Humph, the 3 old men from the Li clan coldly snorted. They dashed out simultaneously, landing on the heads of the 3-headed flood dragon as they began their frenzied slaughter. Yen Tai and the young man from the demon cult weren't in a hurry. They quietly watched as the battle unfolded. Such a battle was extremely taxing on the user of the divine inscriptions. White Deer Institute. A cold light flickered in Yen Tai's eyes. Seeing the battle between the two of them, he stealthily released his astral energy. Abruptly, a gigantic face of the netherworld abruptly lunged forward. As the gigantic face neared the azure dragon, it abruptly took a bite out of it. Instantly, rays of ghostly light seeped into the body of the azure dragon, wreaking havoc within the body of the divine inscriptions. Grandmaster Gaza's countenance was extremely unsightly to behold. The three old men from the Li clan didn't hold back as they unleashed their attacks. The azure dragon divine inscriptions continuously disintegrated, and with a groan of agony, Gaz spat out a mouthful of fresh blood as he staggered backwards. He clutched his chest as he stared in the direction of Fenrir. The divine inscriptions he had inscribed weren't weak, but now, he was being attacked by the three old men. I have my own judgment. Fenrir calmly replied, seeing Gaz's gaze. Gaz nodded his head, but he felt extremely embarrassed. If this was the case, even if Fenrir acknowledged his strength, he would definitely not have a share of the first position. It was extremely likely that the three old men from the Li clan would snatch it away. Not only that, the second position would be in danger. After all, he was the first to be eliminated in the third round. Gaz was filled with hatred. Gaz, it seems like your strength is only so-so. Old First mocked. In front of the three old men from the Li clan, Gaz didn't have the slightest advantage, not even after 3 rounds. Humph, Gaz coldly snorted. This time around, I admit defeat. You three against me, what's there to be proud of? I only hate the fact that I didn't have any good helpers. Grandmaster Gaz, you can't say things like that. During the first round, Qin Wendian already had the intention to help you, yet you were too arrogant, berating him for reminding you. During the second round, when we needed to join forces, you only cared about breaking the formation by yourself. If the three of us joined forces, we would definitely be able to break the formation even faster. Bai Lu Yi, who was standing behind Qin Wendian, spoke. Gaz furrowed his brows when he heard Bai Lu Yi's words. If it wasn't for Bai Lu Yi's status, he would have already berated her. I know you are unhappy with the defeat of the White Deer Institute. However, I, Gaz, have done my best. Gaz faintly replied. After which, he shifted his gaze onto Qin Wendian. This young man assisted me this time around, but he only focused on inscribing the formation. The defeat of the White Deer Institute has nothing to do with me. Don't worry, Grandmaster Gaz. The rewards promised to you will not be small. The large-eyed elder understood Gaz's intentions. Gaz nodded lightly, glancing at the divine inscriptions inscribed by Qin Wendian as he coldly snorted, what's the use of you in this battle? After speaking, he flicked his sleeves. The White Deer Institute hasn't lost yet. Qin Wendian faintly stated, his words causing Gaz's countenance to freeze. However, Qin Wendian's eyes gleamed with sharpness as he icily stated, just because you lost, doesn't mean that the White Deer Institute has lost. If you can't do it, scram. Chapter 257. If you can't do it, then scram. As the sound of Qin Wendian's voice faded, a sharp glint of light shot over, especially from Gaz. His brows were as sharp as swords, and a terrifying light flickered in his eyes. As a divine inscriptionist, one could only imagine the coldness in Gaz's heart. A powerful might gushed forth from him, enveloping Qin Wendian. The others were also stunned by Qin Wendian's words. This young man was too arrogant, telling Gaz to scram if he couldn't do it. His tone was incomparably arrogant. Ha, how interesting. Not only has the White Deer Institute been defeated, it seems like there's going to be internal strife soon. Yen Tai laughed sinisterly. If Qin Wendian wanted to make a move, he would naturally be more than happy to do so. Only then would he have a chance to kill Qin Wendian. If you don't give me an explanation, even if you are a guest of the White Deer Institute, I won't let this matter rest, Gaz coldly stated. Grandmaster Gaz, since you have already been defeated, you should temporarily retreat. The White Deer Institute still wishes to continue fighting. Bai Lu-yi could tell that Qin Wentian had some confidence in himself. Maybe, he really had the ability to inscribe a peak-tier, third-ranked attack-type inscription. Seeing that Gauze wasn't willing to give up, she naturally stood on Qin Wentian's side. Gauze's countenance stiffened as he stared at Bai Lu-yi. I was invited here by the White Deer Institute. Without me, how could the White Deer Institute have reached this step? Now that I've been defeated, the White Deer Institute immediately changed their attitude. A cold light flickered in Bai Lu-yi's eyes. This Gauze actually pointed the spearhead at the White Deer Institute, as though he was blaming them for not treating their guests well. How laughable. In the first round, Qin Wentian was the one who sensed the final divine inscription. Whether Grandmaster Gauze or not, there was no difference. In the second round, although Grandmaster Gauze was defeated, Qin Wentian was the same as me. What's the problem with reaching this round? Since when did you, Gauze, take credit for it? Bai Lu-yi didn't continue speaking. In the third round, Gauze was directly defeated, and there was nothing for him to do. Since our White Deer Institute has invited Grandmaster Gauze here, we'll still respect you regardless of the outcome. However, Qin Wentian is also a guest of our White Deer Institute. It's one thing for you to lose, but you still have to spout such arrogant words at Qin Wentian. Grandmaster Qin is still fighting for our White Deer Institute. Bai Lu-yi continued, you, Grandmaster Gauze, have always wanted to prove yourself in this battle. I also wish to reply to Grandmaster Gauze. What's the use of you in this battle? Fine, fine. Gauze's countenance turned ashen. He didn't expect that he would be reprimanded by a junior today. Little E, don't be rude to Master Gauze. In the direction of the White Deer Institute, the large-eyed elder couldn't help but sigh in his heart when he saw how Bai Lu-yi was clearly helping Qin Wentian. However, the fact that he spoke out to stop Gauze only now showed that he was extremely dissatisfied with Gauze's performance. Earlier, Bai Lu-yi had already said that Gauze was too busy breaking the formations during the second round, ignoring her and Qin Wentian. Grandmaster Gauze, you can step down for now. Don't disturb others, the large-eyed elder spoke to Gauze. Gauze's countenance sank as he coldly glanced at Qin Wentian. After the exchange, I want to see how you are going to give me an explanation. After speaking, he flicked his sleeves and retreated, as a cold intent permeated the air. Interesting. Yen Tai smiled. Leave this brat to me. Okay. The three Li clan elders laughed. The first place was already in their bag. Yen Tai wanting to kill Qin Wentian had nothing to do with them. Let them slowly fight it out. In the direction of the Leng clan, Leng Lin's eyes flickered with a cold light. Kill him. Earlier, she had heard her father's words. Yen Tai had said that if the Leng clan continued with the exchange, she would be in grave danger. All of this was caused by Qin Wentian. He had to die. Those from the Leng clan all had ice-cold expressions on their faces as they stared at Qin Wentian. This person had to die. If they allowed him to live, he would become a target of hatred for their Leng clan. The young man from the demon cult naturally wouldn't interfere. He merely watched from the sidelines. Yen Tai's sinister eyes stared at Qin Wentian. Don't worry, I won't let you die so quickly. Before you die, I will make sure you have a good time. Qin Wentian swept his gaze over, his eyes filled with a terrifying killing intent. He had said before that he would definitely kill Yen Tai today. If Yen Tai didn't die, how could he face Ling Ning? He had to die, Yen Kong had to die, and Ling Jian had to die. That pitiful and beautiful young lady had died in such a cruel manner. The image of her beautiful smiling face would still resound in Qin Wentian's mind. Those who caused her death would have to pay the price. The first one would be Yen Tai. Yen Tai's silhouette slowly rose up into the air as the gigantic face stared at Qin Wentian, causing Qin Wentian to feel a chill run down his spine. Qin Wentian stepped out as his astral energy circulated. The divine inscriptions he had inscribed finally began to move. The spectators only felt a terrifying vortex churning about madly. This vortex was akin to the roiling clouds, roaring as it rose higher and higher. The terrifying energy within the vortex caused the chi of heaven and earth to frenziedly flow into the vortex. In the center of the vortex, the spectators suddenly felt a terrifying sharpness emanating from it. That was the keening of swords. Countless sharp swords danced about madly within the vortex, transforming into a vortex of swords that pushed forward layer by layer, transforming into a tidal wave of swords. What kind of divine inscription is that? The pupils of the spectators narrowed as they stared at Qin Wentian's divine inscriptions. That surge of sword intent grew more and more terrifying, akin to a rolling snowball that grew stronger and stronger with each passing moment. Yen Tai coldly snorted. After which, the gigantic face abruptly opened its bloody mouth and lunged towards Qin Wentian's divine inscriptions. Qin Wentian's silhouette soared up into the air along with the sword waves. Abruptly, a terrifying killing intent gushed forth, fusing together with the terrifying sword waves, instantly enveloping the entire space. Die! At this moment, Qin Wentian's finger pressed forward. Instantly, the surging sword waves were akin to a tsunami, gushing forth with a terrifying killing intent that engulfed the entire space. At this moment, only the humming of swords could be heard. Yen Tai's countenance stiffened as his countenance turned extremely unsightly to behold. Specks of ghostly light whistled through the air. Puchi, Puchi, Yen Tai coldly snorted. The gigantic face of the divine inscriptions howled as it lunged forwards. Despite the millions of swords piercing into it, they couldn't even move an inch. However, Qin Wendian stabbed out with his finger again, causing the whirlpool to churn once more. From within the whirlpool, a gigantic sword manifested, illuminating the 9 heavens. The sword flashed with a cold light, causing the skies to change color. As the sword whistled through the air, the gigantic face of the divine inscriptions was pierced through by the gigantic sword. After which, with a piercing sound, the gigantic face of the divine inscriptions was completely destroyed. The countless swords shot towards Yen Tai, causing his countenance to drastically change. Numerous puppets materialized in the air, blocking in front of him. You've violated the rules. Qin Wendian icily stated, as he stabbed out with his finger for the 3rd time. Instantly, the energy of the heavens congregated on the tip of the sword rain. Die! Qin Wendian's countenance was as cold as ice. His swords rained down on Yen Tai's puppets, shattering into pieces. I concede. Yen Tai howled in rage. He sprinted down the platform, only to see a screen of swords descending upon him. The whistling sound of the wind caused him to freeze in his tracks. Chi, 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 chi. Numerous astral swords rained down on Yen Tai's surroundings, riddling the space around him with holes. Yen Tai turned his head to look at Qin Wendian, who was standing in the middle of the screen of astral swords. His countenance paled. How could he have imagined that a 3rd-ranked divine inscriptionist would be able to inscribe such a peak-level divine inscription? In the air, the eyes of the young and powerful 3rd-ranked divine inscriptionist gleamed with sharpness. Sword chi revolved around him, and the killing intent in his eyes caused Yen Tai to feel a bone-piercing chill in his bones. I've already conceded, you are not allowed to act. Yen Tai roared in rage. You've already violated the rules, or you'd already be dead. Qin Wendian indifferently stated, I've said it before. Today, I will definitely kill you. As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Wendian stabbed out with his finger, causing Yen Tai's countenance to turn deathly pale. And chi. Numerous swords pierced into Yen Tai's body. In an instant, Yen Tai's body was riddled with holes, and a gigantic sword was embedded into his head. His entire countenance was twisted with malevolence, incomparably terrifying. Today, I will definitely kill you. As Qin Wendian's voice echoed in the air, Yen Tai's body twitched. A soft sound rang out as blood rained down from the sky. Yen Tai's body was instantly annihilated, transforming into dust by the countless swords. Yen Tai, dead. The divine inscriptionist with the highest chance of obtaining first place in this exchange had fallen in the hands of a young third-ranked divine inscriptionist, Qin Wentian. Once upon a time, he was a third-ranked divine inscriptionist that only a few people knew of. He used the most domineering method to kill Yen Tai. The countenances of those from the Yen clan abruptly changed. Yen Tai was dead. His death meant that in this exchange, their Yen clan would no longer be able to obtain one of the top 3 spots. Those from the Yen clan had also heard of the grudge between Qin Wentian and Yen Tai, but they didn't really care. They believed that Yen Tai would deal with Qin Wentian. But now, Qin Wentian had actually killed Yen Tai. Their gazes were filled with intense hatred when they stared at Qin Wentian. Yen Kong was also filled with hatred, but at the same time, his body was trembling uncontrollably. How could this be? Qin Wentian had actually killed Yen Tai. How could this be true? Those from the Leng clan were similarly stunned speechless. Yen Tai had died. In that case, the slot for their Leng clan was like a bubble. Even if they had someone to exchange for it, they wouldn't have the chance to do so. Their Leng clan could forget about obtaining even a single slot. Not only that, the person who had personally destroyed their hopes and killed Yen Tai was none other than the person they had once given up on, Qin Wentian. Once, Qin Wentian was so close to the Leng clan. But for the sake of Yen Tai, they had sent Leng Ning away and forced her to commit suicide. They had personally caused a person who could have been a friend to become an enemy. Chapter 258. Leng Mao's countenance turned ashen. He clenched his fists so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. After paying such a huge price and giving so many benefits to Yen Tai, what did their Leng clan gain in the end? Yen Tai was dead. For the sake of a few slots, they had sacrificed Leng Ning, shouldered the curse of infamy, and even offended Qin Wentian. And now, Qin Wentian had used divine inscriptions to defeat Yen Tai. What did this mean? The Leng clan was like a joke. Well done. At this moment, a voice rang out from the direction of the Leng clan. It was none other than Leng Ning's father. When he saw Qin Wentian killing Yen Tai, he felt a sense of satisfaction in his heart. After Leng Ning's death, he knew that as her father, he had let her down. Leng Mao coldly glanced at him. Leng Jian barked, "You, shut up." "Me, shut up." Leng Ning's father coldly laughed. "Back then, who was the one who gave the order to kill my daughter, Leng Ning, and to give up on Qin Wentian?" After which, they did everything they could to curry favor with Yen Tai. Now that Yen Tai is dead, Qin Wentian will be the one to receive the slot. Leng Jian's face was ashen. Feeling the sharp gazes of the elders above him, his heart trembled. Such a scandal had occurred, and they had paid such a huge price. Who would bear the responsibility for this matter? Leng Mao was an elder, so he would definitely be fine. But what about him, Leng Jian? The gazes of the crowd all turned to Qin Wentian. At this moment, Qin Wentian's aura was as cold as ever. His killing intent permeated the air as he stared in the direction of the Yen clan. A violent aura gushed forth from him, and everyone could feel the coldness radiating from him. "The next one is you." Qin Wentian pointed his finger at Yen Kong. In an instant, Yen Kong felt as though his entire body had been plunged into an icy abyss. Qin Wentian's words were akin to an announcement of his death. Qin Wentian's gaze was like a sharp sword piercing through his heart. Thinking of the psychological trauma caused by Qin Wentian the last 2 times, his body trembled slightly. The fear was extremely strong. He was truly afraid of Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian was like a curtain of darkness that enveloped him, causing him to be unable to see the light. "He killed Uncle. Kill him. Kill him." Yen Kong's body trembled as he pointed at Qin Wentian. He then turned his gaze onto the members of the Yen clan, only to see them all coldly staring at him, causing Yen Kong's heart to tremble violently. "You're the one who caused this." An old man glared at Yen Kong as though he wanted to tear Yen Kong apart. He had heard that Yan Kong and Qin Wentian had a grudge against each other. After which, Yan Kong brought Yan Tai's son to kill Qin Wentian, resulting in the death of Yan Tai's son. After which, Yan Tai's rage grew and he forced the death of a woman that Qin Wentian loved, resulting in the enmity between them. Initially, they didn't care about it. But now that Yan Tai was dead, the Yan clan was no longer fated to participate in this trial. All of this was because of Yan Kong. He even caused a genius divine inscriptionist to view the Yan clan with hatred. And this genius divine inscriptionist was backed by the White Deer Institute. From today onwards, Yan Kong shall be expelled from the Yan clan. His life and death have nothing to do with the Yan clan. That old man coldly stated. In an instant, Yan Kong felt his mind going blank as his vision turned blank. The Yan clan expelled him from the clan. What was this? Without the Yan clan, he would die. Qin Wentian would definitely not spare him. Father. Yan Kong turned his gaze onto his father, only to hear the old man continuing, if you want to help him, follow him to the afterlife. Yan Kong's father paled as he glanced at Qin Wentian. He understood that the elders of the Yan clan would only consider their own interests when making decisions. Now that Yan Tai was dead, there was no longer any meaning in seeking revenge. So what if they killed Qin Wentian? They would only offend the White Deer Institute. There was no benefit to them at all. What should they do in such a situation? Give up on Yan Kong and cut all ties with him. This way, no matter how much Qin Wentian hated Yan Kong, he wouldn't be able to direct his hatred towards the Yan clan. As long as Qin Wentian was a little smarter, he would know that the Yan clan had the intention of sacrificing Yan Kong. Father. Yan Kong's eyes turned red when he saw his father not speaking. Back then, they forced the Leng clan to sacrifice Leng Ning. Now, the Yan clan wanted to sacrifice him. Yan Kong. At this moment, a cold voice rang out. Yan Kong turned his head, only to see Qin Wentian standing in the air, exuding an intense killing intent. Yan Kong's countenance instantly paled. Retribution. Today, you shall die as well. Qin Wentian flicked his finger, and in an instant, a torrent of sword intent gushed forth. Yan Kong only felt a towering sword intent locking onto his body. He soared up into the air, yet the sword light pierced right through him. Piercing sounds rang out as Yan Kong's body fell from the air. Yan Kong, dead. Let's go. The elder from the Yan clan flicked his sleeves and departed. The body of Yan Kong's father trembled as he walked to the side of Yan Kong. Lifting his head, he coldly glanced at Qin Wentian before following the members of the Yan clan and departing the area. Qin Wentian understood that the Yan clan hated him, but they weren't willing to form an enmity with him. Yan Kong's father hated him even more, but the Yan clan wouldn't allow him to seek revenge. This was the result of the talent and strength he had displayed. The actions of the Yan clan had greatly affected the Leng clan. They were pondering how they should handle this matter. Qin Wentian's hatred for the Leng clan was definitely not any weaker than his hatred for the Yan clan. They were the ones who forced Leng Ning to her death. Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered as he returned to his original location. When Qin Wentian killed Yan Tai and Yan Kong, the Li clan's three brothers and the youth from the demon cult hadn't interfered. They had personally witnessed the power of Qin Wentian's divine inscriptions, and could sense how terrifying they were. Naturally, they were more than willing to exhaust Qin Wentian. However, at this moment, the Li clan's three brothers and the youth from the demon cult already had an ominous feeling in their hearts. Qin Wentian's performance in the third round, in addition to his miraculous perception during the first round, had already placed him as the #1 ranker in the heart of Grandmaster Fenrir. Not only that, the White Deer Institute didn't only have Qin Wentian, they also had Gauze and Bailu Yi. Even the weakest among them, Bailu Yi, was extremely powerful. Even if there was some internal strife, it wouldn't be able to mask the overall strength of the White Deer Institute. If Qin Wentian really joined forces with Gauze, the White Deer Institute would have long since been defeated. Not bad, You are much stronger compared to that old man Gauze. What a joke, he was still boasting shamelessly earlier. The Li clan's eldest brother stared at Qin Wentian, admiration in his eyes. Such a young peak-tier third-rank divine inscriptionist was truly impressive. Not to mention, the perception he had displayed during the first round was truly shocking. Gauze's countenance turned ashen when he heard this. Earlier, when Qin Wentian had displayed his prowess in the Tao of divine inscriptions, his countenance had already turned extremely ugly. His words were too arrogant. "Senior, please guide me." Qin Wentian calmly stared at the Li clan's three brothers, the coldness radiating from his body retracted by several degrees. Yen Tai and Yen Kong had already died. Next, it was time for him to obtain the number 1 ranking for the White Deer Institute. "Ha, just call me Uncle Li. We don't deserve the title of senior. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Let me take a look at your prowess in divine inscriptions." The Li clan's eldest brother was in an extremely good mood when he heard Qin Wentian addressing him as senior. His tone was also much more polite. This was how humans were. If others respected them, they would return the respect. Naturally, this was built on the basis that both parties were equal. If it weren't for the fact that Qin Wentian had displayed his prowess, the Li clan's three brothers wouldn't have been so polite to him. Qin Wentian nodded his head lightly. Stepping forward, he waved his palms as a terrifying sword intent gushed forth once more. Millions upon millions of sharp swords frenziedly slashed out. The Li clan's three brothers floated in the air as their 3 flood dragons blasted out, colliding with the millions upon millions of sharp swords. The swords and flood dragons intertwined in a frenzy, as violent roars reverberated through the air. The sound of the swords whistling through the air was exceptionally ear-piercing, as the air currents around them grew even more violent. Qin Wentian stepped forward, his finger unceasingly pointing forward, as though with him as the center, countless resplendent gigantic swords erupted forth, with no end in sight. Finally, a roar rang out as one of the flood dragons was destroyed by the swords. "Ha, well done, I concede." The Li clan's eldest brother laughed heroically. Qin Wentian waved his palms as the sword chi dissipated. "Uncle Li's divine inscriptions are powerful, I'm only slightly better than you. Don't be so humble, there are 3 of us while you are the only one. Not only that, we are several tens of years younger than you, we are not even qualified to be your disciples." The Li clan's eldest brother waved his hands as he laughed. "We 3 brothers will definitely be friends with you, don't look down on us." A smile also appeared on Qin Wentian's face. After which, the Li clan's eldest brother turned his gaze onto the young man from the demon cult as he stated, "You are so young as well, what a blow to my confidence. Let's give it a try." "Right." The young man from the demon cult nodded his head. After which, the gigantic python formed from divine inscriptions lunged forth, clashing against the 2 remaining flood dragons. After a series of frenzied clashes, the young man from the demon cult was defeated. Ultimately, his divine inscriptions were still a notch weaker than the young man from the demon cult. Qin Wentian killed Yen Tai and defeated the 3 brothers from the Li clan, while the divine inscriptions of the 3 brothers defeated the young man from the demon cult. The rankings were already set in stone. What a twist in the road. The large-eyed elder laughed uproariously. He initially thought that the White Deer Institute wouldn't be able to obtain first place, but who would have thought that Qin Wentian would give him such a pleasant surprise? This young man isn't bad. The old man beside the large-eyed elder spoke. All of a sudden, his heart trembled as he exchanged a glance with the large-eyed elder. After which, their gazes shifted to Fenrir, who was floating in the air. Grandmaster Fenrir had also said that this young man wasn't bad. From the looks of it, it was obvious who this young man was referring to. A smile appeared on Grandmaster Fenrir's face as he nodded his head. The results of this exchange can be considered as satisfactory. The White Deer Institute naturally obtained first place, the Watermoon Mountain Villa obtained second, and the Demon Cult obtained third. The result of Grandmaster Fenrir's announcement was already within the expectations of the spectators. Some were disappointed, some were shocked, and some were happy. Bai Lu Yi, on the other hand, was extremely happy. The White Deer Institute had obtained first place. Not only that, it was because of Qin Wentian. How could she be happy? Gauze's countenance was extremely ugly to behold. He had arrogantly said that he wanted Qin Wentian to give him an explanation. But now, did Qin Wentian even need to give him an explanation? Ha, Gauze, let me give you a word of advice. In this exchange, what use does the White Deer Institute have for you? The voice of the Li clan's eldest brother drifted over, his words extremely piercing to Gauze's ears. These were the words he had given to Qin Wentian, but now, it was more appropriate to use them on him. What use did they have for him? Chapter 259. Gauze's heart was filled with hatred. This old man from the Li clan shouldn't have touched his sore spot. Seeing the gazes of the crowd landing on him, Gauze felt that this was the first time he had felt so humiliated. He had arrogantly said that Qin Wentian was useless, yet Qin Wentian single-handedly obtained the top position for the White Deer Institute. Gauze had nothing to do with this. How could he have imagined that Qin Wentian, who was so young, would have such high attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions? Since this was the case, why did the White Deer Institute still invite him? Could it be that even the White Deer Institute didn't know how high Qin Wentian's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions were? Not only was Gauze taken aback, the spectators from the Star-Seizing Manor were all deeply shocked as they cast a deep glance at Qin Wentian. In the future, this young man had the chance to become a fourth-ranked Grandmaster like Grandmaster Fenrir. The status of a fourth-ranked Grandmaster was completely different from that of a third-ranked Grandmaster. A fourth-ranked Grandmaster could inscribe fourth-ranked divine inscriptions and inscribe fourth-ranked grand formations. Fourth-ranked grand formations could deal with Heavenly Dipper sovereigns. This was the reason why the Yen clan was willing to sacrifice Yen Kong. Because of the existence of the White Deer Institute, they couldn't kill Qin Wentian. In that case, they wouldn't be able to obstruct his growth. Since there was no way to obstruct him, the only way was to resolve the enmity between them. Hence, they sacrificed Yen Kong. Qin Wentian's countenance was calm. Obtaining the top position in the exchange was something he had promised Bai Lu Yi. Similarly, he needed an opportunity like this as well. This way, the White Deer Institute would have a clearer understanding of him, and his path in the future would be much smoother. Thank you all for your hard work. At this moment, atop the city walls, the sharp-eyed middle-aged man beside Grandmaster Fenrir glanced at the participants as he indifferently stated, according to the agreement, the White Deer Institute, other than the Grandmasters participating in the exchange, can bring another 10 people with them to the refinement grounds. The Watermoon Mountain Villa can bring 8, and the Demon Cult can bring 6. Everyone nodded their heads. They had prepared for this exchange for a long time precisely for the sake of this. Now, they had finally obtained the qualifications to participate. 3 days later, bring your men and gather here. After that, we will set off for the refinement grounds. In addition, the other transcendent powers of the Moon continent will also be heading there at the same time. Now, go and prepare yourselves. The sharp-looking middle-aged man continued, his words causing the countenances of the crowd to stiffen. They all understood very well that the fortuitous encounters in this trial were great, but there was also great danger. In the Eastern Divine Region, other than these 3 powers, there was also the Zhaixing Manor. Outside of the Eastern Divine Region, there were 3 other transcendent powers in the Moon continent, and all of them would be bringing many people to the training grounds. However, there would be intense competition between these powers, and in addition to the inherent dangers of the training grounds, this would definitely not be an easy training ground. The Taoist cultivation grounds of the Celestial Lord, the participants this time around should all be existences at the peak of Yuanfu. Since Yang Fan is participating, what about the other rankers on the Heavenly Fate rankings? Many people thought this, but they still stood up one after another, bowed towards the top of the city walls, and then left. After the departure of the crowd, Fenrir smiled at the sharp-looking middle-aged man. These people are not bad. It seems like the number of participants entering the refinement grounds this time around would be unprecedented. The middle-aged man nodded his head. What a pity, it would be perfect if Grandmaster Fenrir could enter as well. Ha, if I can enter, the Heavenly Star Border Realm cultivators of the Zhaixing Manor would be able to as well, and there would be nothing left for me to do. Since today's matter has come to an end, I shall take my leave. Fenrir clasped his hands, bid farewell, and left. Yang Fan, what do you think? The sharp-looking middle-aged man asked Yang Fan. Let's hope that they would be of some use, Yang Fan replied in a low voice. In his eyes, no matter how powerful a third-rank divine inscriptionist was, they were still just divine inscriptionists. To many, they might be extremely important, but to a transcendent power like Yang Fan, being a divine inscriptionist was just another occupation. There was nothing special about it. He didn't lack divine weapons. In terms of combat prowess, he was confident that he would be able to kill them 100 times over. From Yang Fan's point of view, for stellar martial cultivators, strength was everything. These divine inscriptionists would only be of some use to him when he entered the refinement grounds. That was all. In the White Deer Institute, after Qin Wendian and the rest returned, the mood of the White Deer Institute was extremely good. Now that they had obtained the first position, they would be able to obtain 10 slots. Entering the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions, every single slot was extremely important to them. It meant that they would be able to have another expert enter the refinement grounds. At this moment, in a great hall, several members of the White Deer Institute were gathered. Qin Wendian was present as well, but Gauze wasn't present. Gauze knew that he had no face to return to the White Deer Institute, and hence, he didn't return with those from the White Deer Institute. The White Deer Institute naturally didn't mind Gauze's departure. With Qin Wendian around, Gauze's usefulness was negligible. However, they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. They initially thought that Gauze would be able to help, but who would have thought that the arrogant Gauze would end up in a conflict with Qin Wendian? With regards to the candidates for the refinement grounds, does anyone have any opinions? In the Great Hall, there were several elders of the White Deer Institute present. At this moment, the large-eyed elder spoke, seeking the opinions of the crowd. Since the first position was obtained by Qin Wendian, why don't we first ask him if he has any requests? A scholarly-looking old man in white faintly spoke. The large-eyed elder nodded, it's only right. After speaking, he turned his gaze onto Qin Wendian as he smiled. Qin Wendian, the reason why we obtained the first position is because of you. Let me briefly explain to you the details of the refinement grounds. Recently, there's a high possibility that the refinement grounds are the Dao cultivation grounds of an ascendant. For ascendants who are proficient in divine inscriptions, they would be able to obtain great fortune, but at the same time, they would also face immense danger. This time around, there would definitely be many geniuses from the various transcendent powers. Since you've obtained the first position, do you have any requests for the candidates? An expression of contemplation appeared on Qin Wendian's face. This time around, there would be both fortune and danger. If one's strength was too weak, they would definitely encounter unforeseen dangers. Even with Chu Mang's strength, he wouldn't be able to survive. If there was any danger, the first person the Institute would protect would definitely be Bai Lu Yi, followed by him. The Institute has already decided, I have no requests. Qin Wendian indifferently replied. It was best if Chu Mang and Fan Lu didn't enter. The people of the White Deer Institute wouldn't be able to protect them all. Since you have no requests, let's make the decision then. Little Yi, accompany Wendian out for a walk. The large-eyed elder smiled at Bai Lu Yi. Bai Lu Yi glanced at Qin Wendian and glared at him, causing a bitter smile to appear on Qin Wendian's face. After exiting the Great Hall, Qin Wendian couldn't help but to smile bitterly when he saw that Bai Lu Yi's pure countenance was still filled with anger. Why are you glaring at me? Now that the people of the Institute have misunderstood, I'm afraid that even if I tried to explain, nobody would listen to me. Bai Lu Yi gloomily stated. Earlier, the large-eyed elder had nodded to her with a smile, allowing her to accompany Qin Wendian for a walk. How could Bai Lu Yi not know what this meant? The large-eyed elder had already acknowledged Qin Wentian, and didn't object to their relationship. However, she and Qin Wentian were innocent, yet the elders of the institute still thought that there was something between them. How could she not be depressed? Do you want me to explain? Qin Wentian shrugged. Do you really want to draw a clear line between us? Bai Lu Yi's lips twitched. Momentarily, black lines appeared on Qin Wentian's forehead. The thoughts of beauties were truly unfathomable. Seeing the embarrassed look on Qin Wentian's face, a smile blossomed on Bai Lu Yi's face. I'm just teasing you, there's no need to explain. Let's go, where do you want to go? Let's go to the Hell Arena for a stroll. Recently, I've been depleting my Yuan meteor stones at a rapid rate. I still need to enter the refinement grounds, so I need to make some preparations first. Qin Wentian laughed, causing Bai Lu Yi to roll her eyes. What did this fellow treat the Hell Arena as? A place where Yuan meteor stones were sent to him? However, after witnessing Qin Wentian's performance in the Hell Arena, Bai Lu Yi could only be speechless. Now that he had stepped into the third level of Yuanfu, his opponents were naturally at the same level as him. Yet, there was still no one who could defeat him. This monstrous fellow was unrivaled within the same level, nobody could pose a threat to him. His battle record instantly rose from 60 consecutive victories to 90. Kiran's name was known by more and more people. When he was at the second level of Yuanfu, he won 60 consecutive victories. And not long after, when he stepped into the third level of Yuanfu, he won another 30 consecutive victories. The next time he appeared, he would most probably join the ranks of those who had achieved 100 consecutive victories. The names of those who achieved 100 consecutive victories in the Hell Arena were all extremely famous. It was unknown if Kiran would be able to break the record of the Hell Arena. In the Pill Emperor Hall, they were also discussing the matter regarding the refinement grounds. The 4 transcendent powers of the Moon continent were jointly in charge of the entrance to the refinement grounds. They had an agreement that every year when the refinement grounds opened, each transcendent power must send an equal number of people to enter. This time around, the number of participants was set at 20. Zhan Chen, for this refinement grounds, you will be the leader, a middle-aged man spoke to the person standing in front of him. This young man exuded an aura of elegance and was extraordinarily handsome. With a single glance, he looked like an ordinary scholar. He was none other than a heavens chosen from the Pill Emperor Hall, ranked number 11 on the Heavenly Fate rankings, Zhan Chen. Disciple understands. Zhan Chen nodded his head lightly. After which, he shifted his gaze onto a beautiful middle-aged woman standing beside the middle-aged man. Although this beautiful woman was already quite old, she exuded an aura of maturity. When she was younger, she must have been a femme fatale. This woman was none other than the beloved daughter of the Pill Emperor, Luo He. Martial aunt, I wonder which junior brother and junior sister are you planning to send? Junior sister Qingcheng, I'm afraid martial aunt won't allow you to enter. Zhan Chen smiled at Luo He. Qingcheng's cultivation base isn't high enough, it's best if she doesn't take the risk. However, Bai Fei wishes to go, I won't stop her. Just bring her along. Luo He smiled at Zhan Chen. Junior sister, you really dote on Qingcheng a lot. You can't bear to see her take the risk. The middle-aged man beside her laughed. These days, those fellows all wanted to discuss marriage, yet they were all rejected by you. Junior sister, do you have any plans in mind? What plans can I have? I'll leave it up to her. I heard that the Hua clan has their own plans, but I don't really wish for Qingcheng to marry into the Hua clan. Sadly, Zhan Chen already has a companion, if not I would have betrothed Qingcheng to Zhan Chen. Luo He laughed. Evidently, she was extremely fond of this heavens chosen from the Pill Emperor Hall. Chapter 260. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. In the star-seizing manner, the 3 transcendent powers gathered. However, the number of participants this time around was much smaller than before. After all, there was a limit to the number of participants allowed to enter the secret realm. For the White Deer Institute, Qin Wentian, Bai Lu Yi, and 10 other participants made up a total of 12 participants. For the Watermoon Mountain Villa, the 3 brothers of the Li clan and 8 others made up a total of 11 participants. As for the demon cult, because only the young man who participated in the exchange had survived, they added another 6 participants, making up a total of 7 participants. The 3 transcendent powers had a total of 30 participants. 6 of them were divine inscriptionists, while the others were all-powerful Yuanfu cultivators. For example, other than Qin Wentian and Bai Lu Yi, the rest were all at the 9th level of Yuanfu. With the White Deer Institute's many years of history, it wasn't difficult to find 10 Yuanfu cultivators. Not only that, their combat prowess was exceedingly high. Especially Bai Lu Jing, a ranker in the Heavenly Fate rankings. He was the leader of the White Deer Institute. Little brother Qin, if you encounter any difficulties in the secret realm, let's work together to resolve them. At this moment, the 3 brothers of the Li clan turned their gazes onto Qin Wentian as they greeted him. Uncle Li is right. We don't have many divine inscriptionists, we naturally have to work together. Qin Wentian nodded his head. They were the scouts for the secret realm, but their strength was considered to be on the weaker side. But if they wanted to venture deeper into the secret realm, it would be much more convenient for them to have divine inscriptionists with them. You're all here. At this moment, a voice drifted over from the top of the city walls. After which, the crowd inclined their heads and saw Yang Fan leading a group of 20 experts walking over. All of their auras were extremely powerful, and when their gazes swept over, a terrifying sharpness could be felt in their eyes. This time around, the members of the Star-Seizing Manor were all elites at the Yuanfu realm. The stronger one was, the greater their chances of success would be. The sharp-looking middle-aged man from back then also appeared. He was the one leading the group today. He waved his hands and stated, "Since we're all here, let's move out." Yes. Everyone nodded as they soared up into the air. A group of figures, majestically headed towards a certain location in the Moon continent. The refinement grounds of divine inscriptions was one of the 18 refinement grounds of Grand Xia. It was on par with the refinement grounds of the spirit beasts and the refinement grounds of celestial souls that Qin Wentian had entered before. For the spirit beast refinement grounds, there were many transcendent powers that had entrances to it. The Spirit Beast Refinement Grounds was controlled by Fairy Qing Mei of the Celestial Lake Palace. As for the secret realm of divine inscriptions, because it was located in the Moon continent, it was under the control of the 4 transcendent powers of the Moon continent. Of the 4 transcendent powers in the Moon continent, the Star-Seizing Manor of the Eastern region, the Sky Ember sect of the Southern region, the Pill Emperor Hall of the Central region, and the Hua clan of the Northern region. Only the Western region didn't have a transcendent power. The location of the refinement grounds for divine inscriptions was located in the western regions of the Moon continent. This place was also known as the Western Desert. In the Western Desert, yellow sand covered the earth, causing it to glow with a golden hue. As far as the eye could see, there was no end to it. Gusts of wind blew past, causing the golden earth to emit rustling sounds. For thousands of miles, not a single human silhouette could be seen. The entire place was filled with an aura of desolation. And right in this quiet and desolate western desert, in a certain space, a black dot suddenly appeared. As the black dot drew nearer, an aura of destruction permeated the air, as the whistling sounds of the wind were exceptionally ear-piercing to the ears. In the blink of an eye, the black dot transformed into a black-colored tempest. The sky abruptly turned pitch black, and the oppressive pressure of the tempest made people feel as though it was the end of the world. The yellow sand was swept into the air, dancing together with the tempest. If there was someone here, they would definitely know that this was the black tempest that would appear once in a while in the western desert. However, at this moment, a group of silhouettes could be seen moving together with the tempest, heading towards the depths of the western desert. How unlucky, to have to encounter this damnable tempest. One of the silhouettes cursed in a low voice, feeling somewhat depressed. This group of people exuded an extraordinary aura. They were none other than those who were rushing towards the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions. The person in the lead was a young man with a muscular physique. His countenance was etched with a hint of arrogance, and his entire body exuded a tyrannical aura. His countenance involuntarily gave off a sense of imposingness. This person's name was Zhao Lai, and just like his name, his personality was like a raging inferno. He was a heavens chosen from the Sky Ember sect, and one of the 4 heavens chosen of the Moon continent, ranked number 28 on the Heavenly Fate ranking. Among the 4 heavens chosen, Zhao Lai was ranked last, but he had never been willing to admit defeat. At this moment, an intense heat could be seen flickering in his eyes. He'd heard that Yang Fan and Zhang Chen had also come this time around. He truly wanted to see how strong were these 2 heavens chosen who were ranked higher than him on the Heavenly Fate rankings. Had they already broken through to the Heavenly Dipper realm? What a pity that Hua Taishu didn't come this time around. I won't be able to witness the glory of the top ranker of the Heavenly Fate rankings. But with Zhang Chen, Yang Fan, Bailu Jing and the rest, this trip won't be too boring. Zhao Lai walked out from the tempest, his voice filled with pride. His eyes were like a ball of fire that blazed. In the vast Moon continent, other than the 4 heavens chosen, there were also several other rankers on the Heavenly Fate rankings, such as Bailu Jing from the White Deer Institute. Among these people, there were both young and old, and this time around, there would definitely be quite a few who would enter the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions. In addition to that rumor, how could Zhao Lai not be filled with anticipation? Increasing his speed, Zhao Lai finally saw an ancient desert city in front of him. This ancient city occupied an extremely vast area, as though it had been excavated by someone. In all 4 directions of the ancient city, there were many experts guarding it. These were none other than the transcendent powers of the Moon continent. They were all here to guard the entrance to the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions. At the front of the ancient desert city, there were many silhouettes that were divided into 3 camps. With a single glance, Zhao Lai knew which power these people belonged to. "Ha, Zhang Chen, Yang Fan, how have you been?" Zhao Lai laughed. Momentarily, Zhang Chen from the Pill Emperor Hall and Yang Fan from the Star-Seizing Manor both turned their gazes towards Zhao Lai. Zhang Chen smiled, "Brother Zhao Lai, how have you been recently?" As for Yang Fan, he didn't say anything. It was as though this was his personality, he didn't like to speak too much. "Since I knew you guys were coming, how could I not be well?" Zhao Lai's voice was extremely loud. His gaze then shifted to the Hua clan's camp, locking onto a certain person as he laughed. "Hua Taishu didn't come, but you did. Now, does the Hua clan want to nurture a second Hua Taishu?" The young man from the Hua clan inclined his head, his eyes gleaming with sharpness as he stared at Zhao Lai. This young man was named Hua Feng, and his cultivation base was naturally at the peak of Yuanfu. Not only that, he was ranked number 60 in the Heavenly Fate rankings. Being able to rank number 60 at such a young age, he could be considered one of the most outstanding characters in the Moon continent. As for why he wasn't so dazzling, it was because there was another person in the Hua clan, Hua Taishu. With Hua Taishu around, everyone in the Hua clan lost their splendor. No matter how outstanding they were, they could only serve as foils. "You still like to talk nonsense," Hua Feng faintly remarked, his words causing a fiery light to flicker in Zhao Lai's eyes. "Not only do I like to talk nonsense, I like to battle as well. I hope you will have the opportunity to spar with me in the future." "Anytime," Hua Feng indifferently replied, as he shifted his gaze away, no longer bothering with Zhao Lai. Zhao Lai, a heavens chosen from the Sky Ember sect, ranked number 28 in the Heavenly Fate rankings. Hua Feng, the most outstanding young man in the Hua clan other than Hua Taishu, ranked number 60. In the Star-Seizing Manor's camp, Bai Lui spoke in a low voice to Qin Wentian. She knew that Qin Wentian came from a foreign land, hence she naturally had to introduce some of the more important characters to Qin Wentian. These people were all people who could summon the wind and summon the rain in the Moon continent. Qin Wentian lightly nodded his head. His head was slightly lowered, but he was silently contemplating these outstanding characters in the Moon continent, especially those from the Pill Emperor Hall and the Hua clan. Zhan Chen from the Pill Emperor Hall, ranked number 11 in the Heavenly Fate rankings. This person exuded a scholarly aura, with an easygoing personality and was easy to get along with. Beside him was his beloved, an extremely beautiful maiden. Yang Fan from the Star-Seizing Manor, his personality was more taciturn, and he rarely spoke. His countenance was always filled with hints of arrogance, as though no one dared to approach him. Zhao Lai's personality was as brazen as a raging inferno. As for Hua Feng, it was still impossible to tell for now. But there was no doubt that these heavens chosen all had their own pride. Even for the extremely calm Bailu Jing, Qin Wentian could sense the pride in his bones. Pride was born from self-confidence, and in Qin Wentian's bones, wasn't it the same as well? Hua Taishu and Hua Xiaoyun didn't appear. However, Bai Fei from the Pill Emperor Hall is here, but Qingqing isn't here. Qin Wentian felt a tinge of disappointment in his heart. Before he came here, he had also wondered if he would be able to meet Mo Qingcheng. Sadly, Mo Qingcheng wasn't here, but Bai Fei was. He recognized Bai Fei, yet Bai Fei didn't seem to notice him. Once, Bai Fei told him that he and Mo Qingcheng were people from two different worlds, and told him not to have any wishful thinking. Now that he had also arrived at the Moon continent, if Bai Fei were to see him, what would she think of him? Most probably, she would think that Qin Wentian was an idiot. Since everyone has arrived, let's not waste any more time and directly enter the refinement grounds of the divine inscriptions. Beside Yang Chen, the sharp-looking middle-aged man indifferently spoke. Each of the four camps had a powerful expert leading them, and all of them nodded their heads in agreement. Instantly, a group of guards from the left and right arrived at an ancient gate in front of the ancient city. Both of their hands were condensed into strange ancient seals, and the seals they condensed were all different. After that, they blasted out, slamming into the ancient gate at the front of the ancient city. In an instant, rumbling sounds rang out as the ancient gate opened, and an ancient aura gushed out from within. After passing through this gate, one would be able to enter the inner parts of the ancient city. Similarly, this was also the destination of the guards, the refinement grounds of the divine inscriptions. Chapter 261. As the city gates opened, the eyes of the crowd gleamed with sharpness as they stepped out, stepping into the depths of the ancient city. What was even more shocking was that when they stepped in, the scenery was extremely similar to what they saw from the outside. From the outside, it was an ancient city, and from the inside, it was the same. Here, there were many ancient palaces, as well as vast lands. The atmosphere was filled with a mysterious and ancient aura. But one thing was for sure, this place was different from the outside. Everyone could clearly sense that there was a terrifying celestial phenomenon energy in the air. Here, there was a sky, and there was a starry sky. Although it was daytime, there was a starry sky. Within the starry sky, there was also starlight. At the center of the starlight, the crowd could see the illusory image of a majestic statue. He stood there, suppressing this land, wanting to trample this land beneath his feet. That's a celestial phenomenon. Seems like the rumors are true. Upon seeing this scene, the same thought appeared in the hearts of the crowd. Those from the transcendent powers should have long since known about this, but the others only understood after entering. They could feel the power of the celestial phenomenon. The shadow of the statue standing in the air gave off a terrifying gravitational force. That was a gravitational celestial phenomenon. There were some who attempted to float up, yet to their horror, they discovered that they were unable to do so. They could only float a little higher, and if they tried to float any higher, the pressure from the celestial phenomenon would completely crush them. Celestial phenomenon. Bailu Jing murmured. After which, he added, seems like the celestial phenomenon was triggered the last time we entered. Before this, although the transcendent powers of the Moon continent knew that this place was extraordinary, they didn't dare to do anything about it. But now, just based on the celestial phenomenon alone, we can confirm that there was once a celestial ascendant cultivating here. Bailu Yi, Qin Wentian, and the rest nodded their heads lightly. They had no idea what happened to those who entered the divine inscriptions back then. Even Hua Taishu was injured, but now they could confirm that this place was once a celestial ascendant. Divine Inscriptionist Grandmasters, please lead the way. At this moment, an old man with thick eyebrows stood beside Yang Fan. His eyes were pitch black, and just a single glance from him would cause people to sink into them. He gave off a sense of danger, and it was obvious that this old man was extremely powerful. That old man is Zhu Sha, a ranker on the Heavenly Fate rankings. Bailu Jing reminded Qin Wentian. After which, he patted Qin Wentian on his shoulders, take care of little E. Yes. Qin Wentian nodded his head. He exchanged a glance with Bailu Yi before walking to the front of the crowd. The three elders of the Li clan and the young man from the demon cult also stepped forward. Little brother Qin, let's go. The eldest brother of the Li clan nodded at Qin Wentian, and then they all walked forward. The people from the Zhaixing house followed them. In the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions, there were many traps, and it was a tradition for divine inscriptionists to clear the way. Not only that, the experiences of the ancestors were useless to the later generations because the ones that could be deciphered had already been deciphered. As for the ones that could claim their lives, they would also die inside. Even if they had the information, they wouldn't be able to bring it out. The various factions advanced deeper into the ancient city and did not encounter any danger. Many places had been destroyed, and there were clear marks of broken runes. Clearly, this was done by someone before them. That towering platform seems to be the place where the constellation stood. At this moment, the gazes of the crowd shifted to a spacious platform that seemed to be a cultivation platform. Around it, there were also many broken stone chairs and pillars. The constellation in the air, as well as the blurry figure of the shadow, stood right in front of the cultivation platform. There's fluctuations of astral energy. Those from the four transcendent powers all sensed something as they sped over. You guys, go up and take a look. Zhu Sha pointed to the towering platform as he spoke to Qin Wentian and the rest. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows. Zhu Sha's tone wasn't polite at all, as though he was ordering them around. These transcendent powers were basically treating them as tools for the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions. Let's go and take a look. Immediately, the three elders stepped forward. Qin Wentian's personality was more cautious, and he stood below the towering platform. There seemed to be traces of divine inscriptions revolving around the platform, giving Qin Wentian a strange feeling. Uncle Li, wait a moment, there's something strange. Qin Wentian called out. When he tried to sense it, he could feel his heartbeat quickening. He could faintly sense that there was a mysterious energy here. As for what it was exactly, he had no way to sense it. The three elders turned their heads and glanced at Qin Wentian. After which, they paused. What did you see? Qin Wentian lightly shook his head. I don't know, but I can sense a terrifying energy moving around. In this kind of place, it's best to be more cautious. You don't know? Zhu Sha frowned unhappily. Since you can't sense it, why don't you go up and give it a try? Senior, this place is extremely dangerous. If we're not careful, we might be consigned to eternal damnation. Why don't we take a detour around the towering platform and explore other places? Although Qin Wentian was unhappy in his heart, he still spoke in a heavy tone. If what you said is true, wouldn't we have to take a detour if we encounter similar situations in the future? If that's the case, what's the point of coming here? Zhu Sha frowned when he saw Qin Wentian doubting his words. Since that's the case, I'll have to trouble Senior to take the lead. Qin Wentian gestured with his hand, not bothering to be polite at all. They didn't come here to beg the star-seizing manor. On the contrary, the star-seizing manor had to rely on them to do things, yet they still had such an attitude. This naturally caused Qin Wentian to feel extremely unhappy. What did you say? A cold intent gushed forth from Zhu Sha, yet the round-faced old man beside him interjected, forget it, little brother's words do make sense. We should be more cautious. Zhu Sha's personality was filled with a baleful aura, while this round-faced old man was much more tactful. They still needed to borrow the strength of a divine inscriptionist, and even if they wanted to settle scores, they could do so after they exited this place. One of us has to go. Zhu Sha coldly snorted. Forget it, third brother, you go. At this moment, the Li clan's eldest brother spoke to his third brother. No way. Qin Wendian decisively rejected. His perception was extremely powerful, and at this moment, the feeling of unease he felt grew stronger and stronger. Scrutinizing the towering platform, he could see the collapsed buildings, as well as the stone tablets and chairs. It was like a sacrificial altar, a place that belonged to the core of the Tao of divine inscriptions. If there was a divine inscription of slaughter here, the consequences would be extremely terrifying. Uncle Li, you can't go. Qin Wendian resolutely stated. They came here with the star-seizing manner, but they weren't here to test the waters. This was a principle. If not, none of them would be able to leave this place alive. The Li clan's three brothers smiled. They could understand Qin Wendian's good intentions, but they didn't want to fall out with the star-seizing manner. At this moment, from the Sky Ember sect's side, someone walked up the towering platform, heading towards the center. There's no problem. Seeing that the person was safe and sound, Zhu Sha's countenance turned even colder. Pooh! Abruptly, a terrifying pressure bore down from the skies, as though a gigantic foot was stomping down. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, the body of that person was directly smashed into smithereens. His blood flowed on the towering platform, and was actually absorbed by it. Such a scene caused the hearts of those who were hesitating to step up to throb. How dangerous! If it wasn't for the reminder from the star-seizing manner, they would have really stepped up. The hearts of the Li clan's three brothers pounded even faster. Drawing in a deep breath, they looked at Qin Wendian with gratitude. How dangerous! If they had stepped up, they would have died for sure. Zhu Sha's countenance sank, but he didn't say anything. Qin Wendian couldn't be bothered with him. His brows were tightly furrowed, and his heart was inexplicably pounding. Careful, there's something strange going on. Qin Wendian spoke in a low voice. As the sound of his voice faded, the earth suddenly trembled, as though it was trembling. It's really the central sacrificial altar. Qin Wendian stared at the towering platform in front of him, his heart pounding violently. The tempering exercise this time around might be different from the previous ones. Wendian, little E, come back. Bailu Jing also sensed that something was wrong. Both Qin Wendian and Bailu Yi returned, while the participants from the various factions gathered together. Boom! Qin Wendian pressed his palms against the ground as he started inscribing divine inscriptions. At this moment, the earth trembled even more violently. Qin Wendian's palms trembled madly, and he could feel the movement of the inscriptions on the ground. Big brother Jing, help me break the ground apart. Qin Wendian commanded. Bailu Jing nodded his head, and after which, a powerful aura gushed forth from him. With a wave of his hand, the earth crumbled apart, as though it was about to break apart. However, the crumbling earth actually started moving again, as though it was trying to reform itself. Slash! Don't let the earth gather. I need some time. Qin Wendian shouted. At this time, the wind was raging, and the terrifying airflow began to spread throughout the entire space. No one would have expected such a situation. Those from the White Deer Institute surrounded Qin Wendian and Bailu Yi in the middle, frenziedly slashing at the earth, while Qin Wendian slammed his palms against the ground, causing the runic outlines of the 8 trigrams to expand outwards. Sealing formation, Bailu Yi instantly understood when she saw Qin Wendian's actions. Qin Wendian was inscribing divine inscriptions. Rumbling sounds rang out. In the sky, the constellation was still the same as before. That shadow stood tall in the heavens, while on the ground, a raging wind howled as destructive currents engulfed this entire space, causing the earth to shatter apart. Hold on. Bai Lu Jing roared. Incomparably sharp astral light revolved around his fingertips, and after which, his silhouette moved like the wind, slicing apart the earth around him. Boom! In the distance, on the ground, numerous mountain peaks abruptly rose up, as though they had materialized out of thin air, growing from the depths of the earth, so tall that they pierced through the heavens. The ancient city was being destroyed unceasingly, as new lands were born. Only the shadow stood tall in the air, eternally standing there, changing the heavens and earth. The hearts of the spectators trembled. They knew that the tempering exercise this time around would be different from all the previous ones. Chapter 262. Qin Wendian frantically inscribed divine inscriptions. Finally, the resplendent divine inscriptions lit up, transforming into a gigantic 8 trigrams diagram. This 8 trigrams diagram enveloped this entire space, emitting a strange light. The squirming runes on the ground seemed to have been sealed, and the destructive energy gushing forth from them seemed to have weakened greatly. Inclining their heads, they stared at the surroundings, only to see the raging winds howling as the cracks in the earth closed up again and again. After a period of time, the destructive energy finally calmed down. Finally, the crowd could see their surroundings clearly. Their bodies were still at their original location, and the constellations in the air were still there. However, this place was no longer the ancient city, but a true cultivation ground instead. What a terrifying grand formation! Qin Wendian's heart trembled. This entire space had been transformed. Everything in the past was just a facade. The cultivation ground was extremely vast, and at the very front, there was a gate. This gate was transparent, and one could clearly see the situation in the distance. Over there were ancient pine trees and ancient peaks, exuding a sense of tranquility. A great hall could be seen there, and within the great hall, a statue could be seen. This statue was seated cross-legged, as though it had already passed away. In its hands, there was an ancient scroll. Ascendant. Rays of sharpness gleamed in the eyes of the crowd. This place was the true cultivation ground of an ascendant. One person died in exchange for the appearance of an ascendant. It was worth it, too worth it. The people from the various camps exchanged mutual glances, their eyes filled with wariness and suspicion. Next, they would have to see who would be the first to obtain the treasure left behind by the ascendant. Bzzz, bzzz. Gusts of wind gusted by as several silhouettes dashed out, rushing towards the gate. However, just as they took a few steps, the ground suddenly lit up. Careful, there's a trap! A person shouted. However, it was already too late. Those who dashed out were instantly enveloped by the flowing runes. Terrifying blades suddenly shot out from the ground, and one of them didn't pay attention to the ground. His body was directly penetrated through, and his death was too horrible to look at. There was another person who suffered an attack from a vicious dragon. Suddenly, a few vicious dragons appeared from the ground and lunged towards that person. That person's astral soul instantly erupted forth as he stabbed out with his finger, transforming into a terrifying blood-colored finger. The entire space around him was illuminated by a terrifying blood-colored light as the body of the vicious dragon in front of him exploded. After which, sounds of crashing rang out as the dragon transformed into a rain of blood. At the same time, his left palm blasted out with a speed as fast as lightning. He didn't forget to rush forward, but the runes on the ground continued to shine brightly. A few terrifying arrows shot out like golden lightning, and there were also tentacles emerging from the ground, wrapping around his legs. A look of extreme fear appeared in the eyes of that person, and after that, he was devoured and killed. Those who rushed out were all dead. Their cultivation bases were all at the 9th level of Yuanfu, and their mandates were all extremely powerful. One step, one kill. The hearts of the spectators trembled. They had personally witnessed the deaths of those people, yet they didn't dare to step out to save them. In fact, they didn't even dare to casually move their feet. The slightest movement might trigger a destructive attack from the divine inscriptions. This is even more dangerous compared to the previous trials. It was none other than an old man from the Pill Emperor Hall. He then continued, "Back then, I was here as well. There are many traps in the ancient city, but not all of them are at the peak of the third ranked. We can see the silhouettes of the ascendant, yet every step we take is filled with killing intent. I absolutely believe that this is the true Tao cultivation grounds of an ascendant." The spectators nodded in agreement. This was much more dangerous compared to the previous trials. One step, one kill. Although it's so close, it feels like it's so far away. It's as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Is there any solution? Zhao Lai from the Sky Ember sect asked in a loud voice. Earlier, he had almost stepped out. He was wondering if he would be able to defend against those destructive attacks if he stepped out. In the past, there were only two ways to deal with divine inscriptions. First, use your overwhelming strength to force your way through. Second, use a divine inscriptionist to decipher the trap step by step. But now, regardless of which method we use, the difficulty is much higher compared to before. The danger is 10 times, 100 times greater. The old man who had stepped into the Tao cultivation grounds before spoke, his words causing the countenances of the spectators to turn heavy. Since this was the case, nobody dared to barge in recklessly. "Esteemed Grandmasters, it's time for you all to perform." At this moment, an old man from the Sky Ember sect spoke, his words causing the countenances of the divine inscriptionists to change. Such a scene was something they didn't wish to see. "We need some time to sense it," the divine inscriptionist from the Sky Ember sect replied. Right. The representatives of the various powers were all conversing with the divine inscriptionists. Over at the Star-Seizing Manor, Qin Wentian and the rest were standing within a ceiling formation, isolated from the rest of the world. They were the ones who were the least affected by the tempest earlier. Yang Fan and the rest turned their gazes onto Qin Wentian. Yang Fan spoke, "The White Deer Institute obtained first place in the exchange. Now, we need all of you to contribute. I'll do my best." Qin Wentian looked at Yang Fan as he replied. Yang Fan lightly nodded his head, before turning his gaze onto the 3 elders of the Li clan and the young man from the demon cult. "Whoever has a solution to this trap, the Star-Seizing Manor will reward you handsomely." The few of them nodded their heads, their hearts were as clear as a mirror. Qin Wentian was very polite when he needed to make use of them. Qin Wentian closed his eyes, quietly sensing everything in this space. Although some of the divine inscriptions were extremely profound, he could still sense them. Back then when Grandmaster Fenrir asked them to locate the divine inscriptions, it was the same for him. However, the divine inscriptions here were clearly incomparable to the ones Grandmaster Fenrir had given them back then. Releasing his heart sense, Qin Wentian's heart pounded violently. He saw a terrifying scene before him. Every step was filled with killing intent, and every step was filled with offensive divine inscriptions. All of them were third-ranked divine inscriptions. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a problem for the Grandmasters here today. They would still be able to decipher the divine inscriptions. What truly shocked Qin Wentian was that these divine inscriptions were all interlinked with each other. Even if one destroyed a segment, it wouldn't affect the other segments of the divine inscriptions in the surroundings. These divine inscriptions weren't individual divine inscriptions, but rather, they were a complete entity. The divine inscriptions in this entire space were a single entity, and the slightest change would affect the rest. If he walked out, he could slowly decipher the divine inscriptions. But while he was deciphering the divine inscriptions, the Grandmaster would have already been killed by the other divine inscriptions. How could he continue? Although the perception of the other Grandmasters couldn't be compared to Qin Wentian, after some time, their countenances gradually changed. One of them spoke, "There's no way to decipher the divine inscriptions. No way to decipher it. The countenances of many sank. If there was no way to decipher the divine inscriptions, they could only force their way through. They had already seen the ending of those who tried to decipher the divine inscriptions, all of them died. Zhu Sha turned his gaze onto Qin Wentian, only to see Qin Wentian opening his eyes. Your perception of divine inscriptions is the strongest here. How long do you need to decipher it? Very difficult, I have no confidence. Qin Wentian replied. Zhu Sha frowned, I'll give you 7 days. After speaking, he closed his eyes. 7 days, to him, was already a very long time. If Qin Wentian couldn't decipher the divine inscriptions, he could only force his way through. A cold light flashed in Qin Wentian's eyes, but he didn't say anything as he continued to comprehend the divine inscriptions. Leaving aside the star-seizing manner, if he wanted to continue forward, he would have to decipher the divine inscriptions first. No matter how difficult it was, he had to do it. Time flowed by, nobody dared to make any reckless moves. Qin Wentian didn't try to decipher the divine inscriptions one by one. He wanted to imprint the complete picture of this entire space into his mind. He believed that if he studied the divine inscriptions one by one, it would be impossible to decipher the divine inscriptions one by one. In that case, there was only one path left. In Qin Wentian's perception, the picture in his mind gradually grew clearer and clearer, becoming more and more complete. When he focused his attention on the picture, Qin Wentian's heart involuntarily trembled. He saw a terrifying divine eagle. This divine eagle wanted to spread its wings and soar into the sky, rushing straight into the 9 heavens, soaring straight into the sky. It inclined its head, its eyes gleaming with sharpness, as though it was filled with unwillingness. Because it couldn't soar into the skies, it couldn't do it. Above it, there was a silhouette stomping down on the ground, suppressing it. It wanted to soar into the skies, yet it couldn't. Hence, its baleful aura towered up into the skies, wanting to kill all those who obstructed it. Those who trampled on it, all had to die. Such an intent caused Qin Wentian's heart to tremble. His eyes opened as he stared at the blurry silhouette in the air. Under the suppression of an ascendant, the divine eagle couldn't soar into the skies. How could they break it? Not only was the divine eagle suppressed, they were also unable to soar into the skies, unable to traverse through space. In the blink of an eye, 7 days passed. Still, not a single person moved. Esteemed grandmasters, is there still no way to decipher it? Zhao Lai's personality was more hot-tempered. During these few days, he would ask the same question every day, but the answer he got was always a negative one. This old man is useless, I have no way to decipher it. An old man faintly spoke. Since we can't decipher it, we can only barge our way through. Zhao Lai asked. Yes. That old man nodded. Fine. Now, go and barge your way through. Zhao Lai spoke to the old man, his tone extremely unfriendly, causing the old man to furrow his brows. This old man's strength is insufficient, I'm afraid I won't be able to barge through. Since this is the case, what's the point of having you around? Terrifying flames erupted from Zhao Lai's body. Abruptly, he slashed out with his palms as a fiery saber light flashed. The terrifying heat of the saber light sliced through the air, directly cleaving the body of the old man into 2 halves. This scene stunned the other divine inscriptionists present. Only to see Zhao Lai turning his gaze onto the others as he icily asked, "Are you guys unable to decipher it as well?" The countenances of the other divine inscriptionists turned incredibly unsightly as they replied, "Let's try." Zhao Lai nodded his head as he continued, "Shouldn't the divine inscriptionists you guys have invited act as well?" Those from the Pill Emperor Hall, Hua Clan and Star-Seizing Manor all turned their gazes onto the divine inscriptionists of their respective camps. Only to see Zhu Sha's gaze shifting onto Qin Wentian as he stated, "The 7 days are up." Qin Wentian opened his eyes, "I still need more time." "There's no more time. I've said it before, if we can't decipher it after 7 days, we can only barge our way through." Zhu Sha faintly stated, "You've also seen the situation in the Sky Ember sect." Zhu Sha didn't continue speaking, but everyone understood. Chapter 263. Qin Wentian stared at Zhu Sha. Evidently, Zhu Sha wanted them, the divine inscriptionists, to be the first to attempt it. Just like what Zhao Lai had said, since they couldn't decipher it, what was the point of having divine inscriptionists? In the eyes of these transcendent powers, the value of divine inscriptionists was to be used. They themselves were very clear of this point, but weren't they also using these transcendent powers to protect them as they advanced? They deciphered the divine inscriptions while these transcendent powers defended against any unexpected dangers. However, the current situation was something that divine inscriptionists had never experienced before. They couldn't decipher the divine inscriptions, and not only could they not decipher it, they were also trapped here. The moment they attempted to decipher the divine inscriptions, the result would be death. Such a situation caused the hidden conflict between both sides to erupt. Those transcendent powers wanted to force them to decipher the divine inscriptions. If they couldn't, they would die. Qin Wentian stared at Zhu Sha, and upon seeing the coldness in Zhu Sha's eyes, he spoke, "I've already deduced some clues. If you want me to decipher the divine inscriptions now, the result would be death. After that, Senior would have to force your way through. If you give me some more time, there might still be a glimmer of hope." Qin Wentian's voice was extremely calm, there was no hint of anger in it. The him now had long since learned how to conceal his emotions, and wouldn't easily reveal his inner thoughts. Zhu Sha furrowed his brows, only to hear Yang Fan interjecting, "Give him some more time." "I'll give you 3 more days," Zhu Sha emotionlessly stated to Qin Wentian. He knew that his attitude would cause Qin Wentian to hate him. However, he didn't care. Qin Wentian was merely a powerful third-rank divine inscriptionist. Could it be that he would slowly wait for him to finish inscribing the divine inscriptions during the battle? Not only that, Qin Wentian wouldn't even have the guts to do so. He could only allow himself to be restrained by them. Zhao Lai pondered as he stared at the situation at the Star-Seizing Manor. He was wondering if they should wait a little longer. The Hua clan and Pill Emperor Hall also turned their gazes over, their gazes landing on Qin Wentian. The Star-Seizing Manor seemed to regard this person highly. Qin Wentian's proficiency in divine inscriptions should be the highest among them. Among the crowd from the Pill Emperor Hall, Bai Fei also saw Qin Wentian. She couldn't help but have a bewildered expression on her face. She could faintly sense that Qin Wentian was extremely familiar, as though she knew him. This feeling was extremely intense, yet she couldn't remember when she met him. It had been more than half a year since she met Qin Wentian. In this half a year, Qin Wentian had shed away his original childishness and was even more handsome compared to before. In addition to his longer black hair, as well as the change in his demeanor, she wasn't able to recognize him for a short period of time. Qin Wentian's transformation was too great, especially in the aspect of his demeanor. Bai Fei wasn't very familiar with Qin Wentian from the start. In her eyes, Qin Wentian was merely a minor character from a small country. She had never seriously scrutinized Qin Wentian's existence before. It was only normal that she couldn't recognize the current Qin Wentian with a single glance. "Let's wait for another 3 days." Zhao Lai spoke. Although he had a fiery temper, he knew that if they were to force their way through, they would suffer heavy casualties. Even he himself didn't have absolute confidence that he would be able to survive. Now, they could only wait. "Is there really a way?" Bai Lui whispered to Qin Wentian. Her attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions weren't bad, but the divine inscriptions in front of her left her completely helpless. She couldn't see through them at all. "Let me think about it carefully." Qin Wentian stared at the shadow in the air. He had every reason to believe that since the Ascendant had laid down this trap, it wouldn't be a dead end. There must be a way to break it. This was a test for the future generations. It was just that this test was too difficult, and if one failed to pass, they would have to pay with their lives. Many people were already growing impatient. On the third day, Zhu Sha glanced at Qin Wendian as he stated, "Time's up." Qin Wendian slowly opened his eyes, as he stated to Zhu Sha, "I have no way to break the formation, but I can try to walk through it. However, my current strength isn't sufficient, and I need those from the star-seizing manor to cooperate with me." A sharp light flashed in Zhu Sha's eyes. Since they couldn't break the formation, they had to follow him. Didn't that mean that they would have to follow Qin Wendian and take the risk? "How many people do you need?" Zhu Sha asked. "At least 10, Qin Wendian replied. "Since you are someone invited by the White Deer Institute, it's more than enough to let those from the institute follow you," Zhu Sha indifferently stated. Qin Wendian furrowed his brows, but his expression returned to normal in an instant. However, this instant movement of his was captured by Zhu Sha. "Don't worry, the people from the White Deer Institute are all elites. You should be more familiar with them. Why are you worried that their strength isn't sufficient?" Zhu Sha continued. Qin Wendian furrowed his brows. "Bailu Jing, what do you think of this risk?" Bailu Jing couldn't help but feel his heart stirring when he heard the way Qin Wendian addressed him. Before this, Qin Wendian was also extremely polite to him, calling him Big Brother Jing. "That's the only way." Bailu Jing understood Qin Wendian's meaning, as he nodded his head. "Fine, I can't guarantee that we will be able to pass. Let's leave it to fate. All of you, follow me closely. You must be fast, use your fastest speed to rush over. Not only must you be fast, every step you take, use your strongest suppressive force, stomping on the ground." Qin Wendian explained to Bailu Jing and the rest. Just these 2 points, speed and strength. The fastest speed, and the strongest suppressive force. The countenances of the crowd flickered. Maintaining a fast speed while exerting strength in every step was extremely difficult. After all, if they wanted to be fast, their steps had to be light and graceful, floating in the air. But if they wanted to exert strength in every step, it would be extremely difficult. Bailu Jing nodded his head. "We will do our best." "Not our best, but we must do it. If not, we might all die." Qin Wendian's countenance was solemn. Bailu Jing and the rest all had solemn expressions on their faces as they nodded their heads seriously. Zhu Sha, on the other hand, was staring at Qin Wendian. He wanted to see what method Qin Wendian would use to pass through. No matter what, with Qin Wendian as the guide, they could only wait and see the results. "Let's line up properly. Me and Bailu Yi will be in the middle, Bailu Jing will be behind me, and the rest will be on my left and right. In this way, you guys can make up for our lack of strength." Qin Wendian arranged their positions as the crowd drew in a deep breath. "Okay, let's move out." Qin Wendian similarly drew in a deep breath. The 12 of them all exuded a tyrannical aura, and many of them even had astral wings on their backs. "Let's go." Qin Wendian stepped out, and the rest of them followed suit. With a thunderous boom, the divine inscriptions below started to move violently. Boom! Qin Wendian and the rest stepped out once more, with incredible speed and strength. Their steps caused the ground to tremble violently, and the turbulent air currents seemed to be suppressed, causing their momentum to weaken. "He's suppressing the divine inscriptions below." The gazes of the crowd froze. This fellow was truly audacious, to think of such a method. Only to see that Qin Wendian and the rest were as fast as lightning, and their steps were strangely synchronized, following Qin Wendian's footsteps. In all directions, the terrifying divine inscriptions wanted to erupt forth, but the instant their footsteps landed on the ground, the divine inscriptions would instantly weaken, as though they were being suppressed. However, the divine inscriptions from afar started to flow towards them, as the terrifying attacks started to converge towards them. "Quick!" Qin Wendian roared, ignoring all the incoming divine inscriptions. They continued advancing, and the divine inscriptions in front of them instantly slowed down. Qin Wendian and the rest directly dashed into the divine inscriptions, forcefully suppressing the incoming divine inscriptions. In the blink of an eye, the crowd discovered that Qin Wentian and the rest had already arrived in front of them. Although it was dangerous, their speed was simply too fast. With a howl of rage, they dashed towards the divine inscriptions at the same time. Behind them, the terrifying divine inscriptions frenziedly chased after them. Over there was an incomparably sharp lightning arrow. Not good. The countenances of Qin Wentian and the rest drastically changed. The divine inscriptions behind them hadn't been suppressed, and had actually caught up to them. You guys leave. An old man abruptly halted his steps. He turned, and the light from his astral soul transformed into a gigantic ancient shield. His white hair fluttered in the wind as he blasted out a terrifying attack. Rumbling sounds of collision rang out, the ferocious converging attacks of divine inscriptions were forcibly blocked by Qin Wentian. But at this moment, the attacks of divine inscriptions on his left and right simultaneously swept over, wanting to engulf him. Puchi! A light sound rang out, the old man's head was penetrated, and his entire body was swallowed whole. These divine inscriptions were like primordial beasts, too terrifying. Uncle Zhong. Bailu Jing's countenance stiffened. With a roar, they directly dashed out of the divine inscriptions, vanishing from this space. Success. Abruptly, the countenances of the people in this space froze, as their eyes gleamed with sharpness. Those people had exited the divine inscriptions. Let's move out, we'll do the same as them. Yang Fan abruptly stood up, as Zhu Sha nodded his head. Now was undoubtedly the most suitable time, they could still catch up to Qin Wentian. That fellow's divine inscriptions were extremely powerful, and if there were any more divine inscriptions in front of them, they could continue to make use of them. Yang Fan led the members of the star-seizing manor into a formation similar to Qin Wentian's, and at the same time, an even more terrifying pressure bore down on the ground. But very quickly, they discovered that things weren't as easy as they had imagined. When they took their second step, the entire space seemed to be tilting as a terrifying pressure bore down on them. Rush over. A terrifying aura gushed forth from Yang Fan, as the group of them continued rushing forward. Very quickly, they met with an unimaginable resistance. The destructive energy unceasingly devoured their lives, and although they continued to advance, 7 of their members had already fallen before they even reached the exit. These people were all at the peak of Yuanfu. Bastard! Zhu Sha roared in rage, the baleful aura radiating from him towered up into the skies as he continued advancing. He seemed to have realized that when Qin Wentian told them to cooperate, it was only to provoke them. His true purpose was never to travel together with them, but to travel together with those from the White Deer Institute. Qin Wentian's group had an easier time advancing, and only one of their members had fallen. Finally, when Zhu Sha and his group passed through the Divine Inscriptions Gate, a total of 11 members from the Star-Seizing Manor had fallen. It could be said that their ending was extremely tragic. The 3 old men from the Li clan opened their eyes, staring at the disappearing silhouettes as they calmly stated, "It's not wise to offend a grandmaster in the refinement grounds." The 3 old men from the Li clan knew very well that the path Qin Wentian had chosen was the most perfect one. Qin Wentian's calm voice caused the hearts of those from the other transcendent powers to pound. Although Qin Wentian hadn't intentionally targeted the Star-Seizing Manor, and it could even be said that this had nothing to do with him, the Star-Seizing Manor had paid a terrible price for their arrogance. Just think about it, if Qin Wentian had brought them out, would they still be in such a miserable state? Chapter 264. The experts from the Watermoon Mountain Villa didn't speak ill of the Li clan's 3 brothers. After all, the Li clan's 3 brothers were invited by them. Even if it was just for the sake of face, they wouldn't go overboard. Not only that, the Star-Seizing Manor was the one to be the villain, why would they want to offend them? Grandmaster Li, what do you think? The experts from the Watermoon Mountain Villa turned to the Li clan's 3 brothers. Old First Li spoke, "From what I can see, the divine inscriptions seem to want to soar upwards. Little brother Qin's perception is stronger, he would definitely be able to see things more clearly than me. Hence, he chose to suppress the divine inscriptions and advanced at an extremely fast speed. Evidently, he understood that they wouldn't be able to suppress the divine inscriptions with their strength. The Li clan's 3 brothers had extremely high attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions. Their deductions were not far from the truth. Qin Wentian also knew that with him taking the lead, the other grandmasters would be able to see through the divine inscriptions. However, with the attitude of the star-seizing manner earlier, no one warned them. Even the 3 brothers from the Li clan chose to keep their mouths shut. What did the life and death of the star-seizing manner have to do with them? Grandmaster Li, do you have a suitable path in mind? The experts from the Watermoon Mountain Villa asked. I will choose carefully. Everyone from the demon cult, let's go together. The more people there are, the more strength there is. We will be able to lessen the burden and suppress the divine inscriptionists. Old Li glanced at the experts from the demon cult. At the same time, Zhao Lai spoke to the divine inscriptionists from the Sky Ember sect. Grandmasters, Zhao Lai, was disrespectful earlier. I hope you won't take offense. As long as you can lead us safely through, Zhao, will definitely reward you. The divine inscriptionists didn't say anything. They knew that Zhao Lai was forced by the circumstances, but how could they say no? Even if Zhao Lai was extremely tyrannical and killed one of their divine inscriptionists, Zhao Lai wouldn't spare them even if they said no. Not only that, it was impossible for them to shake off the Sky Ember sect. With Qin Wentian taking the lead, the others all followed suit. With the divine inscriptionists in the middle leading the way, the experts on the left and right flanks of the divine inscriptionist grandmaster, all of them stepped into the spatial gate that was filled with killing intent. Of course, even though they had managed to do so, they had still suffered heavy losses. Not a single force had managed to escape unscathed. More than 200 people from the 4 forces had come to this trial ground, but in this space alone, a total of 80 people had died. It could be said to be terrifying. Ever since the discovery of the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions, this was the first time that they had encountered such a great opportunity. But at the same time, it was also the most dangerous. If they were not careful, they might lose their lives. This caused the hearts of the survivors to feel heavy, and they didn't dare to be careless. When Qin Wentian stepped through the door, he was surprised to find that the pine trees, the ancient peaks, the hall, and the statues were still in front of him. He could see them, but he couldn't touch them. There was no one around him. Not a single person. Bailu Jing, Bailu Yi, as well as those from the White Deer Institute, all vanished from his sight. That door gives off a feeling of spatial disorder. It's a spatial formation. The moment Qin Wentian stepped through the door, he clearly sensed a wisp of spatial energy. Spatial divine inscriptions, Qin Wentian had seen them before in the secret manual Bailu Yi had given him. Spatial divine inscriptions, they contained the power of spatial laws. His heart pounded wildly. In front of him, a vast expanse of space appeared. There were mountains, rivers, and lakes. Qin Wentian understood that he was currently in the middle of a spatial formation. Not only him, but everyone who passed through the door would also be trapped within this formation. Inclining his head, he stared at the void. That statue was still there, hovering in the air. It was as though no matter where they went, this earth-suppressing statue would always be there, preventing them from flying. This distance seems so close, but how far is it? Qin Wentian's gaze shifted to the pine trees and ancient peaks in front of him, as a sense of longing appeared in his heart. From this dangerous setup, one could see how terrifying the strength of the Ascendant was. He even knew how to use spatial formations. The power of spatial divine inscriptions was definitely a rare treasure. Not only that, could it be that the Ascendant had left behind this trial ground for no reason? There was a high possibility that the Ascendant had left behind an inheritance here, and was choosing a successor for himself. Stepping out, Qin Wentian advanced forward. However, before he could even take 100 steps, he halted again. After which, with a flick of his finger, a beam of astral light slammed into the ground in front of him. Instantly, a thunderous rumbling sound echoed out as a terrifying destructive sword light tore through space, vanishing from sight. Only then did Qin Wentian continue forward. On the way, he encountered many dangers. Some of the traps directly blocked his path, and if he didn't dispel them, he wouldn't be able to advance any further. This made Qin Wentian understand that if he wanted to pass this trial, he either had to have an extremely high level of attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, or he had to be extremely powerful. But of course, if he had both, he would definitely be the successor that the Ascendant wanted to see the most. The traps are getting stronger and stronger, they're already strong enough to kill peak-level Yuan Fu experts. Qin Wentian sat on a hillside, his entire body enveloped by powerful divine inscriptions. Only after the traps were destroyed did he stand up and continue forward. He couldn't help but to sigh in his heart. Even with his attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, he still had to proceed with caution, not daring to be the slightest bit careless. Qin Wentian relied on his high level of attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions to advance. Finally, at this moment, he saw a silhouette not far away from him. This person was a middle-aged man clad in the robes of the Hua clan. His eyes were sinister, and when he stared at Qin Wentian, it caused Qin Wentian to feel a chill run down his spine. Grandmaster Qin. This person had already noticed Qin Wentian earlier, and upon seeing Qin Wentian, he immediately rushed over. After which, he smiled, "Grandmaster Qin, can we travel together?" "Someone from the Hua clan." Qin Wentian glanced at the long robes the middle-aged man was wearing. His countenance didn't change as he lightly nodded his head, "Sure. In that case, please." The middle-aged man smiled. Qin Wentian glanced at the middle-aged man as he smiled, "Senior's strength is higher than mine, please move first. If there's any danger, I will naturally warn Senior. Grandmaster Qin is too polite." Given Grandmaster Qin's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, how can a commoner like me be compared to you? I humbly request Grandmaster Qin to lead the way. The middle-aged man was extremely polite, as though he had something good to share with Qin Wentian. "Since this is the case, I will move first. If there's anything I need Senior's help with, I hope Senior won't take offense." Qin Wentian's tone was similarly polite. "Sure." The middle-aged man nodded. "That's only natural." Qin Wentian didn't say anything else, and continued on his way. Right now, these people all treated divine inscriptionists as treasures. Since this middle-aged man from the Hua clan encountered Qin Wentian, how could he let him off? Qin Wentian decisively agreed because he knew that even if he didn't want to, he had no choice but to agree. He could see that the clothes of this middle-aged man from the Hua clan were torn and tattered. Evidently, the journey here wasn't easy. How could Qin Wentian spare him? The two of them continued on their way, and in the blink of an eye, over 10 days passed. The pine trees and ancient peaks were still the same, and the statues in the Great Hall were eternal. Yet, they continued on, as though there was no end to this path. "Grandmaster, why did we travel such a long distance? Isn't this a waste of time?" The middle-aged man spoke to Qin Wentian. "Senior, if you don't feel at ease, you can move first." Qin Wentian casually replied. "I'm just speaking casually." "Grandmaster, please don't take offense." The middle-aged man laughed. In truth, during these 10 days, although Qin Wentian would occasionally ask for his help, it was much easier than him moving alone. The dangers ahead were still unknown. How could he let Qin Wentian go first? Most likely, the others would still be struggling to move forward in this formation. In fact, it was just as he had expected. Although the dangers in this formation were not as concentrated as before and were only concentrated in one area, this kind of never-ending danger was still impossible to guard against. Bai Lu-yi was currently in a precarious situation. She had encountered an expert from the star-seizing manner in the formation. Although Bai Lu-yi's attainment in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions couldn't be compared to Qin Wentian, she was, after all, an extremely powerful divine inscriptionist. How could the expert from the star-seizing manor spare her? Senior, the traps ahead are getting more and more dangerous. I'm afraid that even if we work together, we won't be able to advance any further. Bai Lu Yi's countenance was somewhat haggard as she spoke to the black-robed old man. This old man didn't like to speak, exuding a gloomy aura. After hearing Bai Lu Yi's words, he didn't say anything. Instead, his eyes roamed over Bai Lu Yi's pure countenance, as well as her towering peaks, causing her countenance to turn even paler as she felt extremely embarrassed. Gritting her teeth, she could only brace herself and continue moving forward. The gray-robed old man stared at Bai Lu Yi's back. That voluptuous figure of hers was exceptionally alluring, and a nefarious fire flickered in his eyes. If one were to say that Bai Lu Yi's luck was bad, then Bai Fei's was even worse. She had accompanied Zhan Chen here, and because her master was Luo He, the people from the Pill Emperor Hall had always taken care of her. Who would have thought that she would be thrown into such a formation? Not only that, she didn't encounter anyone from the Pill Emperor Hall, but instead, an expert from the Sky Ember sect. That person looked to be about 26 or 27 years of age, but his actual age was over 30. His eyes were filled with evil, and he wanted Bai Fei to lead the way for him. With Bai Fei's strength, how could she possibly lead the way? If it weren't for her good luck, she would have already died in the formation. But this young man was truly powerful, he would always save her every time. Along the way, Bai Fei's robes were tattered, her shoulders were exposed, and even her fair skin was exposed. Such a hazy beauty would cause evil thoughts to rise in the hearts of men. Miss Bai, why don't we find a better place to enjoy ourselves? That way, you won't die in this formation before you've even had the chance to enjoy a man. The young man laughed evilly, teasing Bai Fei. If he really wanted to do something to her, she wouldn't be able to stop him. But the young man obviously couldn't bear to part with such a precious stone. He knew what was more important, and so he didn't make a move on Bai Fei. But if things continued like this, Bai Fei knew that she would either die in the formation, or become his plaything. As for Zhan Chen, Zhao Lai, Hua Feng, Bai Lu Jing, Zhu Sha, and the other rankers on the Heavenly Fate rankings, they advanced at an extremely fast speed, destroying everything in their path. But even so, they were all in a sorry state, and there were a few times where they encountered danger. This formation was extremely difficult to deal with. Chapter 265. Qin Wentian and the middle-aged man continued advancing. Although this space was filled with danger, there would eventually be an end to it. At most, they would have to spend more time. If they met with danger that they had no confidence in, they would rather take a detour. And just as Qin Wentian took another detour, he saw a silhouette ahead of him. Involuntarily, Qin Wentian halted his steps. His silhouette flickered as he appeared beside the puppet. This puppet belonged to Bai Lu Yi. The puppet blinked at Qin Wentian, before pointing a finger in the distance, as though gesturing something. This caused Qin Wentian's eyes to narrow as he asked, "You're being held hostage?" The puppet nodded its head. Momentarily, Qin Wentian's heart tightened as he commanded, "Bring me there." Grandmaster Qin. Just as Qin Wentian was about to leave with the puppet, the middle-aged man walked up to him. "Grandmaster Qin, what's wrong? Let's continue on our way." "Senior, I have a friend who encountered some difficulties. Why don't we go together? With Senior's strength, you might be able to help," Qin Wentian replied. However, the middle-aged man merely laughed. Did Qin Wentian treat him as a hired thug? For those who came here and hadn't died yet, it was highly likely that they weren't simple characters. Which one of them didn't originate from a transcendent power? Perhaps, they were all experts from a transcendent power like him. He didn't like this at all. "Grandmaster Qin, it's best if you don't meddle in other people's business." The middle-aged man laughed, causing Qin Wentian to finally furrow his brows. But at this moment, a raging wind gusted by. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed, only to see the middle-aged man instantly appearing in front of the puppet. A terrifying palm imprint slammed downwards, the terrifying might capable of crushing everything. Crackling sounds rang out as Qin Wentian saw that the puppet was directly smashed into smithereens, its remains scattered across the ground. Qin Wentian's countenance abruptly changed. After which, the middle-aged man stared at him as his gaze turned sharp. "Grandmaster, since this is the case, you can lead the way with peace of mind." The Qin Wentian right now was a naked threat. Not only that, he had even destroyed Bai Lu Yi's puppet. After pondering for a moment, Qin Wentian nodded, then turned around and continued to walk forward. The middle-aged man's eyes flashed, and he quietly followed behind him, keeping a certain distance. He still remembered the painful lesson of the star-seizing manner. He could not give Qin Wentian a chance to borrow the power of the divine inscriptions to deal with him. The middle-aged man became much more cautious. Not only did he follow closely behind Qin Wentian, he even rejected Qin Wentian's requests to decipher the divine inscriptions. He only stood behind and watched Qin Wentian. Luckily, Qin Wentian didn't lie to him. Every time, a divine inscription trap would appear. Grand formation. At this moment, Qin Wentian halted his steps as he stared ahead. In front of him, there were two mountain peaks on both sides. The wide pathway seemed to be unobstructed, but Qin Wentian could sense the aura of a grand formation. The middle-aged man abruptly waved his palm, blasting it towards Qin Wentian. At the instant his attack landed on the ground, a hurricane of destruction abruptly manifested as terrifying currents of air flowed. This caused the middle-aged man to laugh. "Grandmaster is truly powerful. Since you can see through it, please break the formation. The exit shouldn't be too far away." As he spoke, a look of anticipation flashed in his eyes. He could faintly sense that the exit was getting closer and closer. "Senior, this grand formation is extremely powerful. If Senior doesn't act, I'm afraid it'll be extremely difficult to break it." Qin Wentian frowned. "I believe in Grandmaster." The middle-aged man laughed, as he clasped his hands behind his back. "In that case, I'm afraid we'll have to delay for a little longer." Qin Wentian stopped and started inscribing divine inscriptions. Numerous divine inscriptions appeared, as a faint pressure gushed forth. The middle-aged man stared at Qin Wentian's every movement. With a flicker of his silhouette, he actually appeared in front of Qin Wentian. A destructive wind circulated around his palms, as his palms turned into a fiery red. A terrifying aura enveloped Qin Wentian, as though he could kill Qin Wentian at any moment. Qin Wentian didn't reply, he continued inscribing divine inscriptions in silence. After a period of time, he started to activate the divine inscriptions to attack the grand formation in front of him, advancing bit by bit. The middle-aged man followed closely behind him, only a step away from Qin Wentian. He could kill Qin Wentian with a single wave of his hand. "Senior, there's no need to be so cautious." Qin Wentian laughed. After which, he turned his head and stared behind the middle-aged man as he coldly asked, "Who are you?" The middle-aged man saw Qin Wentian's countenance changing, yet he didn't move. He merely laughed, "Grandmaster, it's best if you don't play any tricks." However, Qin Wentian's countenance abruptly changed. He stomped on the ground as a terrifying sharpness gushed forth from behind the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's countenance drastically changed as he abruptly turned around. At the same time, his left hand stretched out, grabbing towards Qin Wentian's head. Even if there really was someone, he had to capture Qin Wentian. However, at the instant he turned his head, Qin Wentian's body had already sunk into the ground. At the instant the divine inscriptions flowed, the ground Qin Wentian was standing on instantly caved in. Qin Wentian's body sank downwards as a terrifying sharp sword appeared in his hands, directly stabbing towards the middle-aged man. The moment the middle-aged man turned his head, he knew that he had been tricked. Indeed, as he had expected, there was no one here. However, another terrifying sword screen was exploding towards him. The flaming palms blasted out in a frenzy. He felt a sharp pain in his legs as he screamed in agony. Both of his legs were directly cut off by the sharp swords. The terrifying sword screen forced his body to retreat backwards, drifting over the top of Qin Wentian's head. A terrifying suppressive force came from the void. His severed legs touched the ground as a destructive airflow began to wreak havoc. That was the matrix that Qin Wentian had yet to break. "Save me!" The middle-aged man screamed in agony. But at this moment, Qin Wentian had already sunk into the ground. He didn't dare to poke his head out. In order to kill the middle-aged man, he had also taken a great risk. If he had been a moment slower, the middle-aged man's attack would have blasted him into the matrix and he would have died. But if he didn't take such a risk, he wouldn't be able to kill the middle-aged man. He had no other choice. When everything calmed down, Qin Wentian emerged from the ground. He coldly glanced at the location where the middle-aged man had been. Not even his bones were left. Turning, Qin Wentian sped away, his eyes still flickering with a cold light. Not long after, Qin Wentian returned to the location where the puppet was destroyed. He believed that since Bai Lui had met him here, she should have known that he would find a way to wait for her here. Hence, Qin Wentian had prepared a grand divine inscription formation here, waiting for Bai Lui's arrival. However, what made Qin Wentian surprised was that Bai Fei had already arrived before Bai Lui. Not only that, she was in a sorry state. Behind her, there was a young man exuding a sinister aura. His robes were also covered with dust, and there were even a few injuries on his body. It was evident that he had suffered greatly. "It's him." Upon seeing Qin Wentian, Bai Fei's eyes flickered. The sinister young man also noticed Qin Wentian, and he couldn't help but have an expression of interest on his face. "Let's go quickly," the sinister young man spoke to Bai Fei, and an instant later, he arrived in front of Qin Wentian. "Sir, why aren't you in a hurry?" The sinister young man smiled at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian swept a glance at Bai Fei. At this moment, Bai Fei's clothes were barely covering her body, and many parts of her body were exposed. Below her fair shoulders, her ample bosom could be faintly seen, causing the hearts of men to be filled with lustful thoughts. Not only that, at this moment, she looked extremely haggard, as though she had been forced to do this. Bai Fei gritted her teeth as her countenance turned even more unsightly when she saw the look in Qin Wentian's eyes. "Hee, if you like it, I can give it to you. This might be the first time a beauty from the Pill Emperor Hall." The sinister young man laughed. Qin Wentian glanced at him as he replied, "I still have matters to attend to, please do as you please." The sinister young man continued smiling. It wasn't easy for him to meet such a powerful divine inscriptionist, and this divine inscriptionist seemed to be the strongest in the star-seizing manner. How could he bear to give up? "Sir, please follow me, I will definitely not mistreat you," the sinister young man continued. Bai Fei stared at Qin Wentian. "Have we met before?" At this moment, when she looked at Qin Wentian, although he was exuding a cold aura, the sense of familiarity grew stronger and stronger. She had definitely met this person before, but who was he? For a moment, Bai Fei couldn't think of anything, but she was sure that she definitely knew the person in front of her. Qin Wentian indifferently glanced at her, ignoring her. At this moment, the sound of footsteps drifted over from afar. Qin Wentian turned his gaze over, and his pupils involuntarily narrowed as he stared at the two silhouettes approaching. These two silhouettes were none other than Bai Lui and the black-robed old man from the star-seizing manor. When the black-robed old man saw Qin Wentian, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. It was actually him. He was someone from the star-seizing manor, but after witnessing Qin Wentian's performance during the exchange, in addition to the fact that the star-seizing manor had been harmed by Qin Wentian, a cold light flickered in his eyes. "Grandmaster Qin, what a scheme, causing my star-seizing manor to lose so many experts." The black-robed old man walked over, only to see a cold killing intent flickering in Qin Wentian's eyes, so cold that the black-robed old man felt a chill run down his spine. Thinking of this, the black-robed old man coldly laughed as he walked to the back of Bai Lui. It seemed like this young man hated him to the core. "Grandmaster Qin." An expression of contemplation appeared on Bai Fei's face. His surname was Qin, but she still couldn't think of anyone she knew who was a divine inscriptionist with the surname Qin. Are you alright? Qin Wentian asked. How could I be alright after being held hostage for so many days? Bai Lu glared at Qin Wentian, causing Qin Wentian to heave a sigh of relief. Since Bai Lu could still joke around with him, it meant that she hadn't encountered anything too bad. Release her, and we'll forget about this matter, Qin Wentian coldly stated, staring at the black-robed old man. Qin Wentian, you overestimate yourself a little too much, the black-robed old man coldly replied. Qin Wentian. Bai Fei's mind shuddered as a silhouette appeared in her memories. The silhouette of the young man in front of her slowly overlapped with the image of the young man in front of her, causing her countenance to abruptly change. That's right, it was him. She only recognized him now. This divine inscriptionist was actually that young man from that small country. Chapter 266. The changes in Qin Wentian were too great. In just half a year's time, Bai Fei had almost failed to recognize him. Although she didn't have a deep impression of Qin Wentian back when she was in Chu, she had met him a few times and even had a direct conversation with him. Wu Xiu's memory was extremely good, and she couldn't recognize Qin Wentian. She could only say that Qin Wentian's changes were too great. She could still vaguely remember that Qin Wentian was once an impulsive young man, with hints of immaturity in him. There was also a faint trace of arrogance that belonged to the geniuses of a small country. Back then, she couldn't even be bothered with him. She had once told Qin Wentian not to have any fantasies about Imo Qingcheng, but Bai Fei didn't expect that today she would meet Qin Wentian here, under such circumstances. The youth back then had already shed his childishness and was even more devilishly handsome. His angular features were filled with a sense of calmness and indifference. At this moment, there was even a hint of coldness, causing people to feel a sense of fear. This was a different kind of aura, completely different from the faint arrogance he had back then. However, what shocked her the most was that the Qin Wentian of the past was already a peak-tier third-rank divine inscriptionist. Not only that, he had also killed over 10 peak-tier Yuanfu cultivators from the star-seizing manor. Such a contrast caused Bai Fei to feel a sense of discomfort. That youth had actually come to the moon continent. Didn't he know that no matter how outstanding he was, there was still an insurmountable mountain in front of him? It's actually you. Bai Fei stared at Qin Wentian. Did you intentionally pretend not to know me? Qin Wentian swept a glance at Bai Fei as he coldly replied, Am I very familiar with you? Bai Fei's countenance stiffened as her chest heaved up and down. Her originally exposed fair skin caused the blood of those who saw it to boil. Michem. The devilishly handsome young man silently watched on, feeling that things were getting interesting. Bai Fei and Qin Wentian were acquainted, and Qin Wentian seemed to have some grudges with her. Not only that, Bai Lu from the star-seizing manor was someone Qin Wentian wanted to save. When the expert from the star-seizing manor saw Qin Wentian berating him, a cold light flickered in his eyes. What an impudent fellow. You probably don't understand the situation right now, do you? The black-robed elder suddenly waved his palm forward. The terrifying palm seemed to be able to pluck the stars and the moon as it grabbed at Qin Wentian. Don't hurt our friendship. The demonic young man took a step forward and struck out with his palm, immediately colliding with the palm print that was pouncing towards Qin Wentian, causing a loud explosion. What do you mean? The black-robed expert swept a cold glance at the demonic youth. We're all here for the sake of exiting this formation, why must we fight and kill each other? The demonic young man laughed. Brother Qin, this place is fraught with danger, and you're able to help us out. After we exit this formation, I'll gift a beauty to Brother Qin. Isn't that perfect? Not only that, this friend from the star-seizing manor doesn't have a good temper. Although Brother Qin has high attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions, if you insist on doing things your own way, you'll be at a disadvantage. Bai Fei's countenance stiffened, her countenance incredibly ugly to behold. Gift her to Qin Wentian. Qin Wendian could naturally hear the faint threat in the words of the black-robed elder, yet he still coldly stated, Qin, have no way to trust you. Humph, the black-robed elder coldly snorted, placing his hand on Bai Lu Yi's shoulder. Do you have a choice? Brother Qin, Miss Bai Lu's beauty can cause the moon to blush and the flowers to blush. It's very easy for men to fall in love with her. The demonic youth laughed evilly. Momentarily, the black-robed elder also extended his hand and lightly patted Bai Lu Yi's shoulder, causing her countenance to turn pale. She took a few steps forward, only to see the black-robed elder coldly snorting, his hands still placed on her shoulder. If you dare to make any more moves, I'll make sure you stay here forever. Qin Wendian swept his gaze over to the black-robed elder. The traps in the formation ahead are much more powerful, and no matter how strong you are, you won't be able to break them. I personally witnessed an expert from the Hua clan accidentally stumbling into one of the formations and dying. That's why I'm stopping here. But of course, if you wish to die, I won't stop you. The black-robed elder's hand froze, not daring to make any more moves. He smiled at Qin Wendian. In that case, you're willing to cooperate. Release her first, Qin Wendian stated. I'll take care of her safety. Just lead the way. How could the black-robed elder give up on capturing Bai Lu Yi? Qin Wendian furrowed his brows. She's a girl, I don't trust you. It seems like you have feelings for her, the black-robed elder laughed, before narrowing his eyes. Since that's the case, I won't release her. Qin Wendian's countenance turned even colder. Since that's the case, you can kill me and try to see if you can escape the formation ahead. Qin Wendian's eyes were filled with resolution, leaving no room for doubt. The black-robed elder furrowed his brows. He didn't expect Qin Wendian to be so crazy. It seemed like his feelings for Bai Lu Yi were very deep. Brother Qin, death won't solve the problem. Bai Lu Yi is such a beauty. If she's defiled by this old man, how can you die in peace? The demonic young man laughed evilly, causing the black-robed elder to join in as well. Both sides were unwilling to back down. And indeed, Qin Wendian's countenance turned incredibly unsightly. After a moment of silence, he stated, I'll switch places with her. You guys can capture me and follow behind her. Both of us will be under your control. The eyes of the black-robed elder flickered, as he exchanged glances with the demonic young man. After which, both of them broke out into laughter. Qin Wendian's words seemed to be acceptable. Come over here, the black-robed elder coldly laughed. Qin Wendian glanced at the position the black-robed elder was standing in, before he stood up and walked towards him. Only when he reached his side did the black-robed elder release Bai Lu Yi. Qin Wendian placed both his hands on Bai Lu Yi's shoulders. Are you all right? Bai Lu Yi froze, as a hint of shyness flashed past her face. She didn't expect Qin Wendian to make such an intimate gesture. But in the next instant, she saw a sharp glint of light flickering in Qin Wendian's eyes. How do you want to die? Abruptly, a voice rang out from Qin Wendian's mouth. At the same time, he abruptly stomped on the ground, causing the black-robed old man to freeze. After which, a thunderous boom rang out as his body sank into the ground. You! The black-robed elder howled in rage as he soared up into the air. However, he could feel a terrifying suppressive force pressing down on him. It was easy to get down, but difficult to get up. He lifted his hands in anger and lunged out, only to see Qin Wendian and Bai Lu Yi stepping out. The air currents in this space became chaotic, and in an instant, it was impossible to see anything clearly. However, the terrifying sound of sword whistling could still be heard. Bai Fei was also stunned. After which, she only felt a palm imprint abruptly slamming into her, blasting her out of the formation. Falling to the ground, Bai Fei cursed in a low voice, "Bastard." But when she felt the turbulent air currents in front of her, her heart couldn't help but tremble. So it turned out that that fellow had long been prepared for this, and had set up overlapping divine inscriptions here. The black-robed elder howled madly as he felt an intense pain in his feet. Both his legs had been shattered by the divine inscriptions he had set up earlier. His countenance paled, and an instant later, he saw a pair of ice-cold eyes staring at him, pointing a finger at him. Instantly, a boundless amount of sword light gushed towards him. Both his legs were sprawled on the ground, and he struggled to get up, but he was powerless to do so. "Spare me." A pleading expression flashed in the black-robed elder's eyes, but how could Qin Wendian be polite? His sharp sword slashed out in a frenzy, and finally, the black-robed elder's body continued to sink downwards, as the divine inscriptions on the ground shattered his body. As for the demonic young man, at the instant Qin Wendian made his move, he had already been trapped within the formation. This was a overlapping formation, with a trapping formation, as well as a divine inscription of slaughter. Qin Wendian had been waiting here all along, waiting for Bai Lu Yi's arrival. Who would have thought that the demonic young man and Bai Fei would arrive at the same time? The demonic young man's astral souls flickered, as a golden light enveloped him, helping him to defend against the incoming attacks. At the same time, he tried to break out of the formation, but he discovered that he was trapped within a maze, unable to escape. Finally, the demonic young man stopped, not daring to move recklessly. He wasn't proficient in divine inscriptions, and knew that it would be extremely difficult to escape. But he also understood that as long as he was careful, no matter how powerful the third-rank divine inscriptions were, they wouldn't be able to kill him. Hence, he chose to stop, not wanting to repeat the same mistake as the black-robed elder. The terrifying swords whistled through the air, yet the demonic young man merely waved his hands, as the light from his astral souls enveloped him. A golden body appeared in front of him, blocking the swords. Cracking sounds rang out unceasingly, but the golden body didn't shatter. "Brother Qin, since you can't kill me, why don't you let me go? From now on, we will have nothing to do with each other. How about it?" The voice of the demonic young man drifted out, and at this moment, Qin Wendian and Bai Lu Yi appeared outside the formation. Qin Wendian's countenance was extremely cold. If he didn't kill this person, there would only be trouble in the future. In the formation he inscribed, the strongest killing intent was none other than the slaughter divine inscriptions embedded in the ground. Not only that, the position he was sitting at was precisely in front of the slaughter divine inscriptions. As long as someone walked in front of him, there was a high chance that they would be standing there. At the start, the demonic young man was the one standing there, but after the black-robed elder arrived, he inadvertently shifted his position, causing the black-robed elder to be the one standing there, holding Bai Lu Yi in his arms as he faced Qin Wendian. This had directly led to the death of the black-robed elder. But if the demonic young man merely relied on the peak-tier third-rank divine inscriptions to kill him, it would be extremely difficult. Within the formation, the demonic young man's countenance flickered with a murderous light as a long golden spear appeared in his hands, emanating a terrifying aura of destruction. "Careful!" Qin Wendian spoke. Abruptly, a terrifying beam of light shot forth from the formation as a beam of golden light shot out from the formation, shooting towards them. "Go!" Qin Wendian commanded. His opponents had extremely powerful divine weapons, and it was only a matter of time before the formation collapsed. Qin Wendian was extremely decisive. Knowing that he wouldn't be able to kill the demonic young man, he immediately pulled Bai Lu Yi away. Bai Fei's countenance stiffened, but she soon followed after Qin Wendian. She was too weak in this formation, so she had no choice but to follow the others. Scram! Qin Wendian abruptly turned his head, coldly glancing at Bai Fei. Bai Fei's countenance stiffened as she stared at Qin Wendian. Qin, am a subordinate of Jackdaw. I'm not fit to be together with Miss Bai Fei." Qin Wendian coldly spoke, causing Bai Fei's countenance to turn pale. In the past, how could she possibly look up to Qin Wendian? But now, she had to follow behind Qin Wendian as though she was begging for mercy. How could she not be treated coldly? Even now, in front of Qingcheng, you are still a jackdaw. You're not fit to be together with her. How could Bai Fei endure Qin Wendian's attitude? She swept a glance at the two of them. "The two of you are quite compatible. Whether I'm compatible or not, it's not up to you to decide. You don't have the qualifications yet. Today, I saved your life because you and Qingqing are fellow disciples. As for me and Bai Lu Yi, tell Qingqing that I, Qin Wentian, will definitely come to the Pill Emperor Hall to fetch her. After speaking, Qin Wentian flicked his sleeves and departed, leaving Bai Fei dumbfounded. Chapter 267. After Qin Wentian and Bai Lu Yi left, Bai Lu Yi's pure and innocent eyes stared fixedly at Qin Wentian. At this moment, the coldness radiating from Qin Wentian had already dissipated. Noticing Bai Lu Yi staring at him, he couldn't help but smile as he asked, "You like looking at me so much? Look at your arrogant face." Bai Lu Yi glared at him before shifting her gaze away. Eventually, she couldn't help but turn her gaze onto Qin Wentian as she asked in a light voice, "Mo Qingqing, is she really your girlfriend?" Earlier, she had heard the conversation between Qin Wentian and Bai Fei. Bai Fei was someone from the Pill Emperor Hall, and not only that, Qin Wentian had personally said that he would go to the Pill Emperor Hall to fetch Mo Qingqing. Back then, when Qin Wentian had mentioned Mo Qingqing to her, Bai Lu Yi had thought that he was just joking. Qin Wentian shrugged. Bai Lu Yi's beautiful eyes brightened as she asked, "Can you tell me more about it? I'm very curious. Even beauties like to gossip." Qin Wentian laughed, "Mo Qingqing and I both come from a small country named Chu. That place is under the jurisdiction of the 9 Mystical Palace, and there's always some conflict between my clan and the royal clan. One time, I fainted in a forest, and Qingqing saved me. However, I didn't know that it was her who saved me. She only told me about it after I got to know her." Qin Wentian recounted the past to Bai Lu Yi, as Bai Lu Yi listened attentively. Her beautiful eyes shone with a brilliant light as she listened attentively to the story. "You chopped off Hua Xiaoyun's arm?" Bai Lu Yi exclaimed in shock. If it wasn't for the fact that Luo He was there, the Hua clan wouldn't have spared me." Qin Wentian nodded his head. "In that case, you came to the Moon continent to look for Mo Qingqing?" Bai Lu Yi felt extremely moved in her heart. From a small country, Qin Wentian had come all the way to the Moon continent, one of the 9 continents of Grand Xia. She was very clear on how difficult it was to bring Mo Qingqing away from the Pill Emperor Hall. "The main reason is to kill Hua Xiaoyun. But of course, there's also the matter of your White Deer Institute," Qin Wentian replied. "White Deer Institute?" Bai Lu Yi was taken aback, she didn't understand. "If I tell you, don't blame me for not telling you before," Qin Wentian said. Bai Lu Yi's curiosity was piqued when she saw the mysterious look on Qin Wentian's face. Definitely. Do you know of the hidden bloodline of the Azure Emperor?" Qin Wentian stared into Bai Lu Yi's eyes as he spoke. Bai Lu Yi's heart pounded violently as she halted her steps. This was the greatest secret of the White Deer Institute, something only the core members of the White Deer Institute knew of. Even after so many years, this secret had only grown fainter and fainter. However, how did Qin Wentian know about this? Seeing the expression on Bai Lu Yi's face, Qin Wentian already knew that Bai Lu Yi knew about this. "You?" Bai Lu Yi's beautiful eyes stared at Qin Wentian. "I'm the successor of the Azure faction." Qin Wentian replied, his words causing Bai Lu Yi's body to tremble involuntarily. She felt as though her brain had short-circuited. Qin Wentian was the successor of the Azure faction. Qin Wentian stretched out his hand, retrieving a medallion. The word Azure was engraved on the medallion. "Azure Emperor Medallion." Bai Lu Yi's voice trembled. Seeing Qin Wentian keeping the medallion, she drew in a deep breath and asked, "In that case, are you here to take over the hidden bloodline of the White Deer Institute?" "Do you think that's possible?" Qin Wentian asked. Bai Lu Yi contemplated for a moment before replying in a low voice, "It's hard to say. The White Deer Institute has existed for such a long time, and it would be extremely difficult to force them to obey just because of a command medallion. I don't have any intentions of making the White Deer Institute become my vassal force. But since you're from the Azure faction, are you really willing to remain hidden in the Grand Xia Empire? Why can't you make the Grand Xia Empire tremble? Qin Wendian laughed, his words casual and carefree. Yet, Bai Lu Yi's heart was filled with great waves of shock. This is also a risk. If we fail, the White Deer Institute would be consigned to eternal damnation, Bai Lu Yi replied seriously. Qin Wendian, you have to promise me that before you have enough power, you will not spread the word that the White Deer Institute is part of the Azure faction. When the Azure Emperor fell back then, too many transcendent powers had a hand in it. If they knew that the Azure faction still exists, they would definitely exterminate them. Don't worry, before I have enough power, I will never let others know of my relationship with the White Deer Institute. At most, I'll let others misunderstand our relationship, Qin Wendian joked, his words causing Bai Lu Yi to glare at him. Fine, you have to work hard to gain the recognition of the White Deer Institute. A radiant smile appeared on Bai Lu Yi's face. In that case, you will support me? Qin Wendian laughed, his words causing Bai Lu Yi to glare at him again. Didn't you tell me because you want me to support you? Qin Wendian lowered his head and smiled. After that, he turned his gaze to the horizons and continued walking forward while he spoke in a low voice, if you don't support me, I will directly give up on the White Deer Institute. The White Deer Institute will forever be the White Deer Institute. Upon hearing Qin Wendian's words, Bai Lu Yi's heart trembled once more. If she didn't support him, Qin Wendian would give up on the Azure faction. Not only that, it was such a big secret, yet Qin Wendian had told her not only because he wanted her support, but also because he wanted to know her attitude. This was trust. Qin Wendian had already treated her as one of the people he trusted the most. I'll wait for the day when the Azure faction stands at the peak of Grand Xia. Qin Wendian's silhouette seemed to grow taller and taller. The smile on Bai Lu Yi's innocent face was as radiant as the sun. She also believed that Qin Wendian would be able to do it. Qin Wendian and Bai Lu Yi continued walking forward, arriving at the place where Qin Wendian had killed the middle-aged man. However, before they could even get close, Qin Wendian halted his steps and gestured for Bai Lu Yi to keep quiet as he crouched behind the hill. Qin Wendian's powerful perception could clearly sense that there were people from the Pill Emperor Hall, Zhang Chen, and his beloved. As the number 11 ranker of the Heavenly Fate rankings, Zhang Chen's speed of arriving here was extremely fast. Staring at his beloved Qingyu, Zhang Chen retrieved a medicinal pill and passed it to her. Qingyu, eat this first, it will stimulate the energy in your body. Qingyu glanced at Zhang Chen, her beautiful eyes as calm as still water. After which, she received the medicinal pill from Zhang Chen and swallowed it without hesitation. There's already someone who came here before us. There's no need to doubt his strength, but he's already dead. And just now, the third brother of the Li clan failed to break the formation and died inside. Zhang Chen pointed to the two interspatial rings in front of him as he calmly continued, this is the most dangerous place. However, if we pass through this path, we might be able to reach the exit and obtain the Ascendant's inheritance. As he spoke, Zhang Chen's gentle and refined countenance flickered with sharpness. That was ambition. He was the strongest participant in this trial. If the Ascendant could obtain the inheritance, it would definitely belong to him. Qingyu was clad in a light blue robe, looking clean and beautiful. Her gaze when she looked at Zhang Chen was always so gentle and beautiful, even at this moment. Zhang Chen, you will definitely succeed. Qingyu smiled. At this instant, her smile was incomparably beautiful. Even Zhang Chen couldn't help but feel his heart trembling as a hint of unwillingness flashed in his eyes. After I die, the future of the Pill Emperor Hall will definitely belong to you. Qingyu's smile was filled with a poignant beauty. Her words caused Zhang Chen's countenance to change as he stared at Qingyu in shock. I know, that medicinal pill will not only stimulate my potential, it will also cause me to lose my rationality and listen to your every command. Qingyu still had a smile on her face as she spoke. However, her beautiful eyes were filled with tears as she continued, Zhang Chen, we've known each other for 8 years. I understand you too well. From the first day we met, you have always been so clean and refined, but in your eyes, there's only ambition. I brought you into the Pill Emperor Hall, introduced you to my father, and allowed you to enter the tutelage of my senior granduncle. You've been so hard-working in your cultivation, and your achievements are clear for all to see. In these 8 years, you've become the most dazzling person in the Pill Emperor Hall. You're always filled with ambition, only for the sake of your dreams. Qingyu smiled as she continued, back then, senior granduncle said that Qingxing would become one of the most important people in the Pill Emperor Hall in the future. I know your heart has moved, but I'm no longer able to help you. However, Mo Qingxing might be able to. The gaze you used to look at her, is the same as the gaze you used to look at me back then. I know that if it wasn't for me, senior granduncle would be more than willing to matchmake the two of you. The two of you are the two most dazzling figures in the Pill Emperor Hall, and I can only help you one last time. After speaking, Qingyu turned and walked towards the formation where the third brother of the Li clan died. On the way here, there were already 3 people who had become Zhan Chen's stepping stones. And now, she was the last person to die. Her heart ached. When Zhan Chen took out the medicinal pill, her heart had already died. She understood him too well. Even a single glance from him couldn't be hidden from her. Since her heart had already died, what was the point of living on? Could it be that Zhan Chen really had to act against her personally? How could she allow herself to witness such a scene? Even if she died, she wouldn't allow it. From Qingyu's body, the most beautiful astral soul was released. Wielding a sword with both hands, she released her aura to the extreme as she rushed into the formation. Upon seeing that beautiful radiance, Zhan Chen's heart twitched as a malevolent expression of agony flashed past his face. However, very quickly, it was replaced by determination and ambition. That sharpness of his could not be shaken by anyone or anything. That was his Tao heart. The path he had walked all the way here was too bitter, too tiring. He would continue on this path until the point where he could look down upon the entire Grand Xia. This was his heart, it was unshakable. Closing his eyes, Zhan Chen quietly sensed Qingyu advancing forward, feeling her approaching death step by step. His heart had never been so calm before. However, at this moment, Zhan Chen's eyes abruptly snapped open as a terrifying cold light flickered within. After which, his silhouette flickered as he lunged towards the direction behind him. His speed was as fast as lightning, and his eyes were even sharper than swords. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.